begin with the beach. There is a long grey beach on the northwest coast of what is now Turkey, and drawn up out of the water on it, in rows, there are 1,000 ships. They have been there for 9 years. The sea has worked at them the whole time. The timbers have dried and split, and been patched and split again. The ropes have been spliced so often, they are more knot than rope. The hulls have grown a crust of salt, and under the salt, in the dark of the keels, the wood has gone soft. Some of these ships will not float now. Everyone knows which ones. Nobody says it out loud. Behind the ships there is a camp, and the camp has stopped being a camp. It has become a town. There are huts with proper hearths and doorways. There are paths worn down through the sand to hard grey earth, and the paths go where paths go in a town, from the water to the fires, from the fires to the horses, from the horses out to the place where they burn the dead. There are a few heaps, with 9 years of bones in them. There is a wall with a ditch in front of it, and stakes set in the ditch, and the wall was built to protect the ships. Nobody sails the ships. And across the plain, an hour's walk off, there is a city on a ridge, and the wind is always moving over it. Troy. You can see it from the beach. That is the thing to hold on to. For 9 years, these men have woken up and looked at the walls they came to break, and the walls have been exactly where they were the day before. Children who were born in the first year of the siege are 9 years old now. They carry water up to the men on the walls. This is where the poem starts, not at the beginning of the war. The war is already old. And before we go any further, let me tell you what this is and what it is not, because many people arrive expecting something else, and I would rather you knew now. There is no wooden horse in the Iliad. The city does not burn. Achilles does not die. None of those things happen in this poem. The horse belongs to other, later poems, and the most famous version of it was written by a Roman 700 years after Homer. The death of Achilles is promised again and again here, by his mother, by his own horse, by 2 dying men, by himself, and it is never shown. The Iliad covers about 50 days near the end of a 10-year war, and of those 50 days, only 4 hold any real fighting. It ends with an old man asking quietly for the body of his son. That is not a poem with its ending missing. That is a poet who knew exactly what he was doing. The war is not his subject. His subject is one feeling inside one man, and he names it in the very first word he sings: anger. So, everything he wrote, in order, in plain words, with nothing added and nothing taken out. It will take us a while. There is no hurry anywhere in it. Let me tell you about the anger of Achilles and what it cost. It begins with a plague, and the plague begins with an old man being humiliated in public. His name is Chryses, and he is a priest of Apollo from a town down the coast. Some months ago, the Greeks raided that town, as they have raided every town within reach for 9 years, because an army this size cannot be fed from home. They took the grain and the cattle and the metal, and they took the women. Among the women was the priest's daughter, and she was given to Agamemnon, who commands the whole expedition, because the best of the loot goes to the man with the most ships. Now the priest has come to the beach to buy her back. He has brought a great deal of ransom, more than she is worth by any accounting, and he carries his god's staff in his hands with wool wound around it, so that everyone can see what he is, and he stands in front of the assembled army and asks. He asks well. He asks the 2 commanders by name. He wishes them the fall of Troy and a safe voyage home, and then he asks for his child, and he offers the gold, and he asks them to respect his god. The army likes him. You can hear it. The men say yes, take the ransom, give the girl back, respect the priest. Agamemnon says no, and he does not say it briefly. He tells the old man to get away from the ships and not to come back, and that his staff and his god will not protect him. and that his daughter will grow old in Argos working at Agamemnon's loom and sharing Agamemnon's bed. And then he tells him to run before something happens to him. So the priest runs. He goes back along the loud grey shoreline, and when he is far enough away that nobody can hear him, he stops and prays. He reminds his god of the temples he has roofed, and the fat thighs of bulls and goats he has burned. Then he asks for one thing, plainly, make them pay for my tears. And Apollo hears him, and comes down off the mountain, angry in his heart, with his bow on his shoulder, and the arrows shifting in the quiver as he moves. And he comes down, Homer says, like nightfall. He sits away from the ships, and starts shooting. It is the mules first, and the dogs, which is how you know it is a sickness and not a battle. Then it is the men. For 9 days it does not stop. You are in the camp on the 9th day. Try it for a moment. You have learned the shape of the day by now. In the morning, you look to see who is still on their feet, and you do it without seeming to. You listen for coughing from the hut on your left, and there is coughing, so that is all right, and none from the hut on your right, and you already knew that. You do not go and look. At the far end of the beach, the fires are going, and they have been going since the 2nd day, and the men who tend them do nothing else now. That is their work. Someone had to be given it. The wind comes off the water in the morning and off the land in the evening, and there are hours in between when it does nothing at all, and those are the bad hours. You have stopped noticing the smell. That is what 9 days does. You noticed it terribly on the 2nd day, and it made you afraid. And now it is simply the smell of the place where you live, and the fact that you no longer notice it frightens you more than the smell ever did. Nobody knows why it is happening. That is the part you cannot put down. Men are dying at a rate no battle has ever matched, and they are dying in their blankets, and there is no one to fight about it. On the 10th day, Achilles calls the army together. He is not the commander. He should not be the one calling assemblies. He is the best fighter in the world, and he leads 50 ships out of 1,000, and he is perhaps 30 years old, and he calls the whole army into session because 10 days have gone by and the man in charge has done nothing. He says the obvious thing. We are dying twice over, of sickness and of war. Let us ask someone. There are prophets here. Let one of them tell us what the god wants. The prophet is Calchas, and Calchas stands up, and then Calchas does something small that tells you everything about the army he is standing in. He will not speak until he is promised protection. He says, I can tell you, and I will, but the man I am going to name is the most powerful man here. And when a king is angry with a lesser man, the lesser man loses, even if he is right, even if the king lets it go for a while. Swear you will protect me. Achilles swears it. Speak, he says. Nobody will touch you while I am standing here. So Calchas tells them, it is not a broken vow or a missed sacrifice. It is the priest. Agamemnon insulted a priest of Apollo and refused his ransom and sent him away with threats. And the arrows will not stop until the girl goes home to her father, unbought, with a sacrifice sent after her. And Agamemnon gets to his feet with his eyes full of it, and calls the prophet a man who has never once in his life brought him good news. Watch what he does next, because it is exactly the same thing he did to the priest, and it is going to cost him the war. He agrees. That is the point. He says, fine, take her. I want the army alive more than I want the girl, and he even pays her a compliment on the way past, that she is better than his wife at everything, which nobody asked. He agrees to the god's terms, and then he says, but I am not going to be the only man in this camp with nothing. Find me something else. Now. And Achilles asks him where, precisely, he thinks it is going to come from. The loot is divided. It was divided months ago. It is in men's huts. You cannot undo it. Give her back. and when we take Troy, we will pay you 3 and 4 times over." That would have been the end of it. Instead, Agamemnon says, "Do not try to trick me. I am not going to sit here empty-handed while you keep yours. Give me something of equal value, or I will come and take it, from you, or from Ajax, or from Odysseus, and whoever I take it from is going to be very unhappy about it." And now it starts, and it is the finest argument anyone has ever written down, and it does not need any help from me. Achilles calls him a man wrapped in shamelessness, in it like a cloak. He says, "You are greedy beyond anything, and the men will not follow a man like you much longer." Then he says the thing underneath, which is not about the girl at all. "I have no quarrel with the Trojans. They have never taken my cattle. They have never taken my horses. They have never come across the sea to my fields and burned my crops. There are mountains and a great deal of water between them and me. I came here for you, for your brother's wife, for your family's insult, and I do the most fighting of anyone here, and I get the smallest share when it is handed out, and I go back to my ships, tired with something in my hands that you decided to let me keep. I am going home." And Agamemnon does not step back. That is the tragedy of him. He says, "Run, then. Nobody is stopping you. There are others here who will honor me. I hate you more than any man in this army. And here is what I am going to do. Since the god is taking my girl, I will come to your hut myself, with my own men, and I will take Briseis, the prize the army gave you, and I will walk out with her, so that you understand how much greater I am than you, and so that no man ever again stands in front of me and speaks to me as an equal." Achilles' hand goes to his sword. Now Homer could have written him drawing it, and the poem would be over in 6 pages. He writes something better. He writes the pause. He writes the hand on the hilt and the mind working inside it, 2 things at once, whether to clear the men out of the way and kill him where he stands, or whether to stop. And in the middle of that, a hand takes hold of his hair from behind. He turns round, and it is Athena, and nobody else in the assembly can see her. Her eyes are terrible. She says, "I came to stop your hand. Hera sent me and I came, because we both love you. Let go of the sword. Use words on him. Insult him however you like. But hear me. One day he will pay you 3 times over for this. Hold your hands and obey." And Achilles says the thing that makes him more than a fighter. He says, when a god says stop, a man stops, however angry he is. And he pushes the sword back down into the sheath, and she goes. Then he uses the words. He calls Agamemnon a drunk with a dog's eyes and a deer's heart, a man who has never in his life gone to the front of a battle, who takes his cut from men braver than himself and calls it authority. And he swears an oath. He takes the speaker's staff, the one they pass from hand to hand in assembly, the one cut from a tree in the mountains that will never grow leaves again, and he swears on it. "A day is coming when every man in this army will want me, and Agamemnon will not be able to help a single one of them, and he will tear at himself for what he did today." Then he throws the staff on the ground and sits down. An old man tries to save it. His name is Nestor. He is the oldest man in the army by decades, and he has a habit of remembering. He says, "I have fought alongside better men than either of you, men you would not believe if I described them, and those men listened to my advice. So listen. Agamemnon, do not take the girl. The army gave her to him. Achilles, do not fight with a king who has more men than you. Both of them ignore him politely. This is how these things go. The assembly breaks up. Achilles goes back to his huts with his friend Patroclus. Agamemnon puts the priest's daughter on a fast ship with a sacrifice and sends Odysseus to hand her back. And that part goes beautifully. There is a feast on the beach at her father's town, and singing all afternoon, and the old man forgives them, and the god calls off the arrows and the sickness stops. And while that ship is at sea, Agamemnon sends 2 heralds down the beach to Achilles' hut to collect the girl. Homer gives this 11 lines, and it is the cruelest thing in the book. The 2 heralds do not want to be there. They come and stand in the doorway and say nothing, because they are afraid of him. He has to speak first. He says, "Come in, it is not you I blame." And he tells Patroclus to bring her out. And she goes with them, unwilling, and Homer writes that she was unwilling, and then follows the heralds up the beach instead of her, and she is not mentioned again for a very long time. Achilles walks away from the huts and sits down by himself on the shore where the grey water comes in, and cries and calls for his mother. His mother is a goddess of the sea. That is the fact around which his whole life is arranged. She hears him from underneath the water and comes up out of it like mist and sits down beside him and strokes his hair and asks him what is wrong. And he tells her, all of it in order, the way a child tells it, including the parts she already knows. And then he asks her to do something for him, and this is the hinge of the entire poem, so let it land. Go to Zeus, he says. You have helped him before, he owes you. Go and put your arms around his knees and ask him to help the Trojans. Ask him to push the Greeks back to the water and pen them against their own ships and kill them there, so that Agamemnon can watch it happen and understand what he has thrown away. He is asking his mother to arrange the deaths of his own people, at length, to prove a point. He knows what he is asking. So does she. She says yes. But first, she says something else. She says, "My child, why did I ever bring you up? Your life is going to be short. It was always going to be short. That was settled before any of this. And now it is going to be short and full of grief as well. And I wish you were sitting by your ships without any tears in you at all." Then she tells him to stay out of the fighting, and she waits 12 days, because the gods are away visiting the far south. And then she goes up the mountain in the early morning and finds Zeus sitting apart from the rest, and takes hold of his knees and asks. He does not answer her. He sits there for a long time and says nothing, because he knows what it will cost him at home. She holds on and asks again, and tells him to nod if he means it. And finally he tells her that his wife is going to make his life impossible over this, and then he nods. That is the nod that makes it real. Homer says the dark brows came down, and the hair swung forward, and the whole mountain shook. And the last thing in the first movement of the poem, after the plague, and the quarrel, and the oath, and the child crying on the beach, is the gods having an evening. Hera notices immediately, and asks who he has been talking to, and he tells her to stop asking. She sulks brilliantly, and it is broken up by their son Hephaestus, the smith, the one with the ruined legs, who limps around the hall pouring wine into everyone's cups, and telling his mother it is not worth quarrelling with his father over mortals, and they watch him going bandy-legged from couch to couch, and they laugh. They laugh all evening. There is music. Then they go to bed, and Zeus sleeps beside Hera, and down on the beach, in the dark, at the edge of the ships that will not float, the best fighter in the world sits by himself and waits for his own side to start losing. That night Zeus keeps his word, and he does it by lying. He sends a dream to Agamemnon, and the dream comes in the shape of old Nestor, because Agamemnon will believe Nestor, and it stands over his head while he sleeps and tells him that the gods have agreed at last, and Troy will fall today. Arm the whole army. Do not wait. He wakes up with the voice still in the room. He sits up and puts on a soft tunic and a great cloak and good sandals, and hangs the sword from his shoulder, and takes the staff his family has carried for 3 generations, and goes out into a mourning that is going to be the most humiliating of his life. He gathers the leaders first and tells them the dream. Then he explains his plan, and it is a strange one, and Homer never tells us where it came from. He says, "Before we march, let us test the men. I will stand up, and tell them the war is lost and that we are sailing home, and you will go among them and hold them back. Nestor does not like it. Nobody likes it. Nobody says so. So the army is called. 9,000, 10,000 men coming out of the huts and up the beach in a noise Homer compares to bees pouring out of a rock, sitting down in their thousands on the sand. And Agamemnon stands up in front of them and tells them the truth as it would look to any of them on a bad morning. He says, 9 years gone. The timbers of our ships are rotting and the ropes have come apart. Our wives are sitting at home and our children are growing up without us. We came here with far more men than they have, and we have not taken the city. It is shameful. Let us go home. He does not get to the second half of the plan, because the army stands up and runs. They run for the water shouting, and the dust comes up off the plain in a wall behind them, and they are calling to each other to get the ships out, and men are knocking the props out from under the hulls and hauling on the ropes and clearing the channels down to the sea, and the noise goes up to the sky. You are in the middle of it, and your hands are already on the stern post of a ship you have not touched in 9 years, and the wood is warm, and you are pulling with 11 other men, and you are crying, and you do not know why, and you are not going to stop pulling to find out. That is the closest the Trojan War ever comes to ending without another death. It ends in a stampede for the sea on a bright morning in the 10th year, by accident, because a king made a stupid speech. Two goddesses stop it. Hera sees the ships moving and sends Athena down, and Athena finds Odysseus standing still in all of that, not touching his ship, and tells him to do something. So he takes Agamemnon's staff and goes into the crowd and turns them back one at a time. Kings and captains he talks to. Ordinary men he strikes with the staff and shouts at. And one man will not have it. His name is Thersites. He is ugly, and Homer describes his ugliness with real relish. Bandy-legged and lame, and round-shouldered and going bald. And he is the loudest man in the army, and he never stops talking. And he stands up and shouts at Agamemnon in front of everyone. And here is the uncomfortable thing. Most of what he says is true. He says, "What more do you want? Your huts are full of bronze and full of women, all of it handed to you first because you are in charge. You took the prize of the best man here in front of the whole army. If he had any anger in him at all, you would already be dead. Let us sail home and leave him to work out how much he needs us." Odysseus tells him he is the worst speaker in the army and threatens to strip him naked and beat him back to the ships, and then hits him across the back and shoulders with the golden staff until a bloody welt comes up, and Thersites sits down in tears and wipes his eyes. And the army, which has just been told exactly what has been done to it by a man it does not like, laughs. They laugh with relief. That is how it works. A man says the true thing badly and is beaten in public, and everyone feels better. Then Odysseus makes the better speech, and Nestor after him, and this is where they turn it. He says, "It is shameful to go home with nothing after this long." And he reminds them of the morning the fleet gathered at Aulis, 10 years before, when they were sacrificing under a plane tree, and a snake came out from under the altar, and went up into the branches, and ate 8 sparrow chicks in a nest, and then the mother 9 birds, and was turned to stone. And Calchas read it out to them then. 9 years of fighting, and in the 10th we take the city. This is the 10th. Stay. They shout for that, until the ships ring with the noise. They sacrifice. They eat, and Homer makes you feel the meal, the ox on its back, and the flame, and the meat on the spits and the wine. And then they arm, and they come out onto the plain, and here Homer does something no modern storyteller would dare. He stops the poem and lists the army. Every contingent, every captain by name, where they came from, town by town, hill and harbor and river, and how many ships each of them brought. It goes on for the length of a small book, 25 minutes if you read it aloud, and I am not going to give you all of it, and I want to be honest with you that I am not. Because here is why it is there. Homer was singing to people whose grandfathers' grandfathers came from those towns. When he named a place, somebody in the room straightened up. That list is the audience hearing itself called out, and it worked on them the way nothing in a modern list works on us. So take it as a sound instead. A coastline of ships, Boeotia with 50 and 120 men in each. Mycenae with 100, the biggest fleet of all, Agamemnon's own. Sparta with 60, under Menelaus. Pylos with 90, under old Nestor. Crete under Idomeneus with 80. Rhodes with 9. Ithaca with 12, and Odysseus at the head of them. And Homer notes in passing that Athena loved him. Salamis under Ajax, the biggest man in the army. Argos under Diomedes, who is going to have the best day of his life shortly. And the 50 ships of the Myrmidons, drawn up on the sand with nobody in them, because their commander is sitting in his hut and has told them all to stay where they are. More than 1,000 ships, 100,000 men, near enough, and Homer names 300 of them, and every single one he names, he tells you where the man was from, because that is what he can still give them. And they come down off the beach onto the plain like fire going through standing corn, and the earth sounds under them, and the dust goes up so thickly that the two armies find each other in it more by noise than by sight. On the other side, the Trojans come out of the gates, and Homer notes one difference and lets it do all the work. The Greeks come on in silence. The Trojans come on shouting, because Troy has allies from half the coast of Asia, and they do not share a language, and there is no one order that all of them would understand. The gap between them closes across a plain where, in peacetime, people used to graze animals. There is a moment before the fighting starts when the war very nearly ends properly, with a rule like a game. A man walks out into the empty ground between the armies, and he is beautiful, and he is wearing a leopard skin over his shoulders with a bow and a sword under it, and he is holding 2 spears, and he calls out for any Greek who wants to face him. This is Paris. It is his war. 10 years ago, he went as a guest to Sparta and left with another man's wife. And the man was Menelaus, and Menelaus' brother is Agamemnon. And that is why there are 1,000 ships on the beach. Menelaus sees him, and Homer says he was glad the way a starving lion is glad. And he comes straight down off his chariot in his armor. And Paris, seeing the man whose wife he took coming towards him across the open ground, steps backwards into the crowd of his own people the way you step back from a snake on a path. His brother Hector sees it. Hector is the eldest son of Priam, and he is the man who holds Troy together, and he says to his brother in front of everyone, "You are beautiful. That is what you are. You look wonderful, and there is nothing behind it. Woman mad. You sailed over the sea and took a fighting man's wife out of his house and brought her home, and you will not stand in front of him for the length of a breath. I wish you had never been born." Listen to them laughing at you. And Paris takes it. He says mildly that his brother is right and that his brother's heart is like an axe. And then he proposes the thing that should have ended it. Sit both armies down. Put me and Menelaus in the middle. We fight for Helen and everything I took with her. Whichever of us wins keeps her, and the rest of you swear friendship, and you go home, and we stay here, and it is over. Hector is so pleased that he walks out into the middle of the ground, holding his spear crosswise in both hands to push his own men back. And while he is standing there, the Greek archers start shooting at him, and Agamemnon has to shout at them to stop. And they agree to it. Both armies. Lambs are sent for. Priam is sent for from the city, because oaths this size need the old king. And the men sit down on the ground in their thousands and take their helmets off. and there is a silence on that plain that has not been there in 9 years. You are sitting in the ranks with your shield laid flat, and your spear stuck in the dirt beside you. The sun is on the back of your neck. You are thinking about your house, not about arriving home. That is too big to think about. Just the house. Whether the roof held. Which of the trees are still standing. Whether the door still sticks in wet, whether the way it always did, and how you will have to put your shoulder to it, and how you know exactly how much shoulder it takes. Up in the city, a woman is weaving, and a messenger comes to her and tells her that the two men are going to fight for her this afternoon. Helen puts on a white veil and cries, and goes up to the tower over the great gate with two of her women. The old men of Troy are sitting up there, the ones too old to fight, and they murmur when she comes. And Priam calls her over and makes room and says, "Come and sit by me. I do not blame you for this. I blame the gods. They brought this war on me, not you." Then he asks her to name the men below, because he has been looking at them for 9 years and does not know which is which. And she does it. That big one, head and shoulders over everyone, that is Agamemnon, and he was my husband's brother once. That shorter, broader one going along the ranks like a ram through a flock, that is Odysseus. The enormous one is Ajax. And here she stops, because she has counted the captains twice, and cannot find her own two brothers anywhere in the army, and she wonders aloud whether they stayed home or whether they came and are ashamed to be seen. Homer tells us, in one line over her head, that they are both already dead and in the ground back in Sparta. She does not know. Nobody up there tells her. Then the oaths are sworn. Priam comes down, and lambs' throats are cut, and wine is poured out on the ground, and both sides pray, and Priam gets back into his chariot and drives away to the city, because he says he cannot make himself watch his son fight. Lots are shaken in a helmet. Paris throws first. His spear goes into the shield, and the point turns on it. Menelaus prays and throws, and his spear goes through the shield and through the corselet, and tears the tunic at the hip, and Paris twists his body sideways and lives. Then Menelaus brings his sword down on the crest of the helmet, and the sword shatters in his hand, and he stands there for a moment holding a hilt and shouts at the sky. And then he does not stop. He takes Paris by the horsehair on his helmet and turns, and drags him bodily towards the Greek lines by the chin strap, choking him. And Aphrodite breaks the strap. The helmet comes away, empty in his hands. She wraps Paris in mist and lifts him off the field and sets him down in his own scented bedroom inside the walls, and then goes to find Helen on the tower, disguised as an old woman who used to card wool for her, and tugs her dress and tells her Paris is asking for her. Helen knows her at once, by her throat and her eyes, and says no. She says it well. She says, "Are you going to keep doing this to me for the rest of my life? Go and sit by him yourself. Give up the gods and stay with him and marry him. I am not going back into that bedroom. The women here would never stop talking about it, and I have enough grief already." And Aphrodite frightens her. She says, "Do not provoke me, or I will hate you as much as I have loved you, and I will arrange things so that both sides loathe you and you die badly." Helen goes. She pulls her veil across her face and goes, and none of the women around her see the goddess leading her. And in the bedroom she stands in front of him and tells him he should have died out there. And he tells her not to be cruel, that the war will turn, and that he wants her now. And she goes to him. Down on the plain, in the sunlight, in front of two armies who have taken their helmets off and are waiting for the war to be over, Menelaus is walking up and down looking for a man who is not there anymore. Agamemnon stands up and says the obvious. "My brother one, give us Helen and the property and the payment, and we will go." The Greeks shout for it. Nobody on the Trojan side can answer, because there is nothing to say. So the truce holds for the length of an afternoon, and then the gods take it apart, and they do it over a drink. Zeus needles his wife about it. He says, Menelaus has clearly won. Shall we end it here, and let them make friends, and let the city stand? And Hera will not have it. She hates Troy for an old slight, and she says so. And there is a bargain struck up there that is worth hearing plainly. Zeus says, I will give you Troy, and I love it. That city has always given me my share, and I would have saved it. But take it. Only remember, one day I will want to destroy a city that you love. And when that day comes, you will not stand in my way. She agrees to it immediately, and adds that Troy is his to give, and then she sends Athena down to make sure the oath gets broken by the Trojan side, so that the guilt sits with them. Athena walks through the Trojan ranks and finds a good archer named Pandarus, and stands next to him, and asks him quietly whether he would like to be famous. Shoot, Menelaus. Every man in Troy will thank you, and Paris most of all. So he unwraps his bow, which was made from the horns of a wild goat he shot himself, and the men in front hold their shields up to hide him, and he draws until the string is at his chest, and the iron is at the wood, and lets go. The arrow goes through the belt, and through the corselet, and into the flesh over the hip, and the blood comes down dark over the skin. And Agamemnon, standing next to his brother, makes a sound and takes hold of him and says he is dying, and then makes a speech about how someday Troy will pay for this, and then admits, in the middle of it, that if his brother dies, he will have to go home, and every man here will start talking about sailing, and Helen will be left in the ground of a foreign country, and it will all have been for nothing. Menelaus tells him he is not dying. The doctor comes, Mucaean, and draws the arrow out backwards, and puts his mouth to the wound, and sucks the blood out, and spreads something on it that he learned from his father, who learned it from a centaur. And while they are doing that, the Trojan line comes forward. Agamemnon walks his own lines. It is his best hour, and it is not very good. He praises the men who are already doing what they should, and then he starts shaming the ones who are standing still, and he gets it wrong. He accuses Odysseus of hiding. He tells Diomedes that his father was a better man than he is, and Diomedes, who is going to fight the next day better than anyone in the whole poem, says nothing at all, because he respects the office even when the man in it is behaving like this. Then the army's close, and Homer stops being interested in the kings. The two lines come together, and he compares the noise to two rivers in flood meeting in a gorge, so loud that a shepherd hears it from the hills. Shields lock, spears go over the top, men fall, and dust comes up over them. And in the middle of the first exchange, a young Trojan comes forward and is speared under the nipple by Ajax, and goes down like a poplar cut in a wet meadow, and Homer stops the whole battle to tell you about him. His name was Simoisius. His mother had been up on the mountain with her parents to look at the flocks, and on the way down she went into labor on the banks of the river Simois, and gave birth to him there, and that is why they called him what they called him. He was 19 or 20 years old, and Homer says, in the plainest words he has, that he never paid his parents back for raising him. There is one man in the Greek army who is about to have the best day of anybody's life in this poem, and it is not Achilles, and it never gets mentioned outside of books like this one. His name is Diomedes. He is young. He is the son of a famous father he has heard about all his life. And on this particular morning, Athena decides to help him. She puts a fire on his helmet and his shield, Homer says, like the star that comes up out of the ocean at the end of summer and burns brightest. And the Trojans see a man coming towards them with light on his shoulders in daylight. He goes through them. Homer's word for it is not a fighting word. It is a river word. He goes through them like a swollen river in winter that takes the dikes out, and the vineyard walls with them, and the work of years goes with the water. Men see him coming and turn to run, and are speared in the back. The archer Pandarus, who broke the truce yesterday, puts an arrow through his shoulder plate and shouts that he has got him. Diomedes has the arrow pulled out through the other side and stands there with the blood coming through the links and prays. And Athena comes and stands beside him and does two things. She puts strength back into his legs, and then she says something that changes what he is for an hour. She takes the mist off his eyes. I have taken the mist from your eyes, she says, so that you can tell a god from a man. So do not fight any of them, whichever one comes at you, except one. If Aphrodite comes into this battle, you may wound her. So he goes back in, and he can see them now, and it makes him worse. He kills two brothers in one chariot, sons of an old man at home who had no other children, and Homer notes that the property went to distant relatives. He kills two of Priam's sons. He kills Pandarus, spear through the nose beside the eye, through the teeth, and out under the chin. Aeneas stands over the body to protect it, and Diomedes picks up a stone that Homer says two men of our time could not lift, and throws it into Aeneas' hip so hard that the socket tears, and Aeneas goes down on his knees in the dirt with his hand on the ground, and the dark comes over his eyes. And then his mother comes for him. Aeneas is Aphrodite's son. She comes down into the middle of a battle and puts her white arms around him and wraps a fold of her robe over him to stop the spears and starts carrying him out. And Diomedes goes after her through the crowd, because a goddess told him he was allowed to, and catches her, and drives the spear into her wrist. It goes through the robe, which is a god's work, and into the skin above the palm, and what comes out is not blood. It is the thin, bright fluid that runs in the ones who do not eat bread or drink wine. And she screams and drops her son on the field, and Diomedes shouts after her to get out of the war and stay out of it. She goes back up to the mountain crying with the fluid running down her arm, and her mother holds her and asks who did it. And Zeus smiles at her and tells her, kindly, that fighting is not her department, and to leave it to the ones who like it. That is Diomedes at midday. By evening he has also gone at Apollo 3 times and been warned off, and then Athena herself gets into a chariot beside him with the axle groaning under the weight of a god and a man together, and takes the reins, and drives him straight at Ares, the god of war, in the open field. And Diomedes puts a spear into the god's belly. Ares screams. Homer says the sound was what 9 or 10,000 men make in a battle, and both armies stopped where they were and went cold. And then he goes up to heaven in a black column of wind and complains to his father. And his father tells him he is the most hateful of all the gods, and he has always liked quarrels and fighting, and he can stop whining, and then has him treated. The wound closes as fast as milk turns when you stir figs into it. Then, in the middle of all this, comes the best small scene in the poem. Diomedes finds himself facing a Trojan ally he does not recognize, a Lycian named Glaucus, and he asks him who he is. Not out of politeness. He wants to know if he is fighting a god again. And Glaucus answers him with a thing that has outlived everything else in the passage. He says, "Why do you want my family? Men are like leaves. 1 year's leaves come out on the trees, and the wind takes them down, and the next year's grow in their place. And men are exactly the same, one crop after another, and that is all. But if you want it, you can have it." And he gives his lineage, and Diomedes listens to it, and somewhere in the middle of it recognizes a name. Because Glaucus' grandfather stayed 20 days in the house of Diomedes' grandfather, once long ago, and they exchanged gifts at the door the way host and guest did, a purple belt and a gold cup, and that cup is in Diomedes' house right now. So Diomedes drives his spear into the ground. He says, "Then you are a guest friend of my family, from my grandfather's time, and I am yours, and if either of us ever comes to the other's country, we have a house there. Let us not fight each other." There are plenty of Trojans for me to kill, and plenty of Greeks for you. Let us swap armor instead, so that everyone watching knows what this is. And in the middle of a battle too, men trade armor and walk away from each other, and the men around them see it and understand it and let it happen. Homer's only comment is dry. Glaucus gave gold armor and got bronze, and Zeus must have taken his wits. That is the same battle, on the same afternoon, in which Menelaus takes a young Trojan alive. The man had been thrown from his chariot, and he takes hold of Menelaus' knees and offers a great ransom. His father is rich. There is bronze and gold and iron in the house, and Menelaus is going to accept. He has already begun, handing him back to be taken to the ships. And Agamemnon comes running up and stops him. He says, "Are you soft on Trojans? Did they treat your house well? Not one of them is to live. Not the men, not the boys, not the child in the womb, not one. Let them all die and be unburied and leave nothing behind them." And Homer says his brother heard the justice in it and pushed the young man away with his hand, and Agamemnon put a spear into his side and stepped on his chest to pull it out. Keep that. It comes back. By late afternoon, a prophet inside the Trojan lines tells Hector to go up into the city and get the women to pray, because the fighting is going badly and it needs something more than men. So Hector goes home in the middle of the war, and this is the part of the Iliad that people remember for the rest of their lives. He comes in through the gates, and the women crowd round him asking about their husbands and their sons and their brothers, and he tells them all to pray, and does not answer any of them because he cannot. His mother meets him and brings wine and tells him to pour some out to Zeus, and then drink. He looks exhausted, and he says, "No, do not offer me wine, mother. You will unstring me, and I have blood and dirt on my hands, and I will not pour an offering to Zeus with hands like this." He goes to his brother's house. Paris is sitting in a beautiful room, polishing his beautiful armor and checking his bow. And Helen is across the room with her women, giving them work to do. And Hector says, "I am not going to insult you properly. There is no time. The men are dying at the wall for your quarrel. Get up." And Paris says mildly that he was just coming. And then Helen speaks to him, and she says the thing she says whenever she is on stage in this poem, which is that she wishes she were dead. She calls herself a horror, and says she wishes a storm had taken her off a mountain and into the sea on the day she was born. And she asks him to sit down and rest, because she knows the trouble is hers. And he says no to her too. "Do not ask me to sit down, however kindly you mean it. My mind is already down there with them." Then he walks to his own house, and his wife is not in it. He asks the servants, and they tell him she went up to the great tower with the child and the nurse, because she heard the Trojans were losing, and she went up there like a woman out of her mind. So he turns round and goes back the way he came, through his own city, along the wide streets, and he meets her at the gate as she is coming down. Her name is Andromache. She has the baby with her, and the nurse holding him, a little boy they call Ustyunax, and she comes up to Hector and takes his hand and cries, and then she argues with him, and it is the best argument anyone makes in the whole poem, and she loses it. She says, "Your own courage is going to kill you. You have no pity on your son or on me, and I will be a widow soon, because they will all come at you together and bring you down. And when you are gone, I would rather be in the ground, because there is nothing left for me. I have no father. Achilles killed my father when he sacked our city, though he had enough respect not to strip him, and burned him in his armor, and the mountain nymphs planted elm trees round the grave. I had 7 brothers, and all 7 of them went down to the underworld in a single day. Achilles killed them all in one afternoon among the cattle and the sheep. My mother was ransomed, and came home and died. Hector, you are my father, and my mother and my brother now, and you are my husband as well. So have pity." Stay here on the wall. Do not make your child an orphan and your wife a widow. Put the army by the fig tree, where the wall is easiest to climb. And he says, I have thought about all of it, but I would not be able to look at the men or the women of this city if I hid from the fighting, and I have learned to be at the front, always, and win my father honor and my own. And then he says the thing that gives the whole scene away. I know how this ends, he says. I know in my bones that there will be a day when Troy is destroyed, and Priam, and all of Priam's people go down with it. And it is not the Trojans I think about. It is not my father, or my mother, or my brothers, however many of them fall in the dirt. It is you. It is some Greek in bronze dragging you away crying, and you weaving at another woman's loom in Argos, and carrying her water, and somebody who sees you crying saying, that one was Hector's wife, Hector who was the best of them at Troy. And you will hear it. I hope I am dead, and covered over, and cannot hear you being taken. Then he reaches out for his son, and the baby screams, and turns away, and hides his face in the nurse's dress, because he is frightened of his own father, of the bronze, and of the horsehair crest nodding at him from the top of the helmet. And both of them laugh. His mother laughs, and Hector laughs. And then he takes the helmet off and puts it down on the ground, and picks his son up, and kisses him, and rocks him in his arms, and prays out loud, let this boy be like me. Let him be first among the Trojans. Let him be as strong as I am. And let him come back from a war one day carrying something he took from a man he killed, and let his mother be glad when she sees it. He puts the child back into her arms, and she takes him against her breast, laughing with her eyes still wet. And Hector puts his hand on her and says, do not grieve for me too much. No man is going to send me to my death before my time. And nobody, brave or afraid, gets out of it once he is born. Then he picks up the helmet, and she walks home, looking back often, crying as she goes. You are on the wall about 20 feet away when this happens, and it is the strangest thing you will see all year. You are close enough to see the child pull his face away from the crest. You can see the exact moment a man stops being the thing the whole city leans on and becomes an ordinary father who has misjudged how frightening he looks. It lasts about as long as it takes to set a helmet on the ground. Then he picks the helmet up and it goes away, and he is the other thing again, and he walks out of the gate, and you watch him go with your hands on the stone. That afternoon Hector challenges the Greeks to send out their best man, and for a moment nobody stands up. Then 9 of them do, and they put their lots in a helmet and shake it, and the one that jumps out is Ajax. Ajax is enormous. He carries a shield made of 7 ox hides, with a layer of bronze over them, and Homer calls it a wall. He and Hector fight through the whole afternoon with spears, then with stones, and they are reaching for their swords when the heralds walk in between them and stop it, because it has gone dark, and as one of them says, night is a good thing to give into. And these two, who have spent an afternoon trying to kill each other, exchange gifts before they part. Hector gives Ajax a sword with silver studs, and its scabbard, and its strap. Ajax gives Hector a war belt, dyed purple. Then the 2 sides agree to a truce, and spend a day burning their dead. Both armies out on the same plain in the morning, washing the blood off men they knew, carrying them onto the fires, crying, and both sides pretending not to look at each other. The Greeks build a wall and a ditch that day too, with stakes in the ditch, and Poseidon watches them build it, and complains that mortals should not be allowed to make anything that will be remembered. Then Zeus keeps the promise he made in the dark to a goddess on his knees. He calls a council in the morning and forbids every god to go down. Anyone who interferes, he says, will be thrown out of heaven so far down it will take a year to arrive. Then he takes his golden scales and puts the fates of both armies in them and lifts them, and the Greek side sinks. And after that it goes badly all day. Thunder over the Greek lines. Nestor's chariot horse shot through the head by Paris, and the old man tangled in the reins with Hector coming. Diomedes turning 3 times to stand, and being answered 3 times by thunder. Teucer the archer working from behind his brother Ajax's shield, shooting and stepping back under it like a child running to its mother, and taking down 8 men that way until Hector breaks his collarbone with a rock. And by evening the Greeks are inside their own wall, behind their own ditch, on the beach, with the ships behind them. And the Trojans do something they have not done in 9 years of war. They stay out. Hector will not let them go back inside the city. He has them camp on the open plain, in front of the Greek wall all night, so that nobody can slip away to the ships in the dark. He sends into the city for food and wine and cattle, and they build fires. And this is where Homer leaves the day. 1,000 fires burning out on the plain between the city and the sea, and 50 men sitting round each one of them, horses standing beside the chariots eating barley and white grain, waiting for the morning. And the fires look, Homer says, like the stars around the moon on a still night when the air has gone completely clear, and you can see everything, every ridge and every headland, and a shepherd out on a hill somewhere looks up and is glad. 50,000 men sitting in the dark in the middle of a plain, waiting, with their fires lit, and nothing to do until it gets light. That night, on the other side of the ditch, Agamemnon cannot hold himself together. He stands up in front of the leaders, with tears running down his face, and proposes, seriously this time, that they get the ships into the water and go home. Diomedes tells him to go if he wants. The sea is right there, and that the rest of them are staying. Nestor tells him something harder. He says, I told you at the time not to take that girl, and you did it anyway, and now let us find a way to make it good. Send men to Achilles with gifts, and with words that will move him. And Agamemnon says yes. He admits it. He says, I was out of my mind, I do not deny it. One man that Zeus loves is worth whole armies, and I will pay. Then he lists the payment, and it takes him a while because it is enormous. 7 tripods that have never been on a fire, 10 bars of gold, 20 cauldrons, 12 racehorses that have won prizes, 7 women from Lesbos, skilled at handwork, chosen for their beauty, and the girl herself, Briseis, returned, and he will swear a formal oath in front of everyone that he never once went to her bed. And when they take Troy, a whole ship filled with gold and bronze, and the pick of 20 Trojan women after Helen. And when they get home, Achilles can marry any one of his 3 daughters he likes and pay nothing for her, and Agamemnon will give him 7 towns near the sea, with people already living in them who will pay him like a god. It is an unbelievable offer. It is a kingdom, and he puts it together without once saying the word sorry, and that detail is not an accident, and Achilles hears it. They pick 3 men to carry it. Old Phoenix, who raised Achilles as a child. Odysseus, because he is the best speaker alive. And Ajax, who is not a speaker at all, and is going along because Achilles respects him. They walk up the beach in the dark, past the water, praying as they go. And they find him playing music. He is sitting outside his hut with a lyre he took out of a city he destroyed, a beautiful thing with a silver crossbar, and he is playing it and singing to himself about the famous deeds of men. And Patroclus is sitting across from him, alone, in silence, waiting for him to finish the song. Then he looks up and sees who it is, and he is delighted, and gets up with the lyre still in his hand, and Patroclus gets up, and they bring the men in and give them the best seats, and put down cushions and mix stronger wine than usual and butcher a sheep and a goat and the back of a pig. And Patroclus does the cooking and throws the offering into the fire, and they all eat properly first, because that is what you do. And when the food is gone, Odysseus makes his speech, and it is a very good one. He tells him what today was like. He tells him Hector is out, there in front of the wall, thinking about burning the ships tomorrow. He says, "Get up before it is too late to fix, because there is no cure for a disaster once it has happened." And then he reads the list. All of it, every tripod and every horse and every town, in order, and he adds one line of his own at the end that Agamemnon never said. "And if you hate the gifts, then pity the rest of us." And Achilles' answer is the moment this poem stops being a war story. He says he has to say what he actually thinks, because he hates a man who says one thing with his mouth and keeps another thing hidden. And then he takes the whole system apart. He says, "I fought for that man constantly, 12 cities from the sea and 11 on foot. And out of every one of them I took a great pile of things. And I brought it all back and handed it to him, and he sat by the ships and gave a little of it out and kept most of it. And the other men got to keep what they were given. Mine he took back." And then, quietly, "Why are we here at all? Because they took a wife from Menelaus, are the sons of Atreus, the only men on earth who love their wives." And then the part that is never worn out. He says the same portion goes to the man who hangs back as to the man who fights his hardest. The same death comes for the coward and the brave. And he says, cattle can be got, tripods and horses can be got, but a man's life does not come back once it has gone past the barrier of his teeth. No raid brings that in. And he tells them the thing his mother told him, out loud, in front of witnesses for the first time. "There are two fates," he says, "and I get one. If I stay here and fight at this city, I do not go home, but my name never dies. If I go home now, I lose the name, but I get a long life, and it will take a long time for death to find me." And then he says, "I am sailing in the morning. I would advise the rest of you to do the same." He is not bluffing when he says it. Something in him means it. Then Phoenix speaks, the old man, and he does not argue about strategy at all. He cries, and he talks about the nursery. He says, "I raised you. Your father gave you to me, and you would not go to dinner with anyone else or eat anything unless I had you on my knee and cut the meat up for you and held the cup. And you ruined a great many of my shirts, spitting wine down them. And I did all of it because I had no son of my own, and I made you my son." Then he tells him a story, which is what old men do, and the story is a warning. There was a hero named Meleager who got angry, for good reasons, and withdrew from a war exactly like this, and sat with his wife while his city was attacked. And they came and begged him and offered him a fortune to come back, and he refused them all because he was still angry. And then the enemy was in the streets, and the towers were burning, and his wife sat beside him and described to him what happens to a city when it falls, and he got up then and saved them. And nobody gave him anything, because he had waited until it was necessary, and by then the gifts were gone. "Come now," Phoenix says. "Come while they are still asking you." And Achilles softens, but only towards the old man, and only a little. He tells Phoenix to stay the night with him, and they will decide in the morning. And he says, "Do not soften me by crying for that man's sake. Do not be his friend in my house." Then Ajax has had enough. He is not built for this. He turns to Odysseus and says, out loud in front of Achilles, "Let us go. This is going nowhere, and we should tell them so straight away, and they are waiting for us." And then he says the one thing that actually gets in, that Achilles has made his own heart hard, and that he does not care about the love of the men who camp beside him, the men who honored him above everybody. And Achilles gives them his real answer, and it is not the one he started the evening with. He has moved, and he has not noticed. He says, "Go and tell him this. I am not going to think about fighting again until Hector, Priam's son, comes all the way through to my own ships and my own huts and sets fire to them." He is not sailing anymore. He is waiting for the fire. You walk back down the beach, along the water with the other two, and nobody says anything at all. You are carrying nothing. You went up there with a kingdom in your mouth, and you are coming back with one sentence, and you already know that when you say it out loud in the hut, the silence afterwards will be the worst part of the whole night, and you rehearse it as you walk, and you cannot make it sound like anything but what it is. And then, because none of them can sleep, they do something small and cold. Agamemnon gets up in the middle of the night and walks the camp, and by the ditch, a handful of them decide to send 2 men into the enemy camp in the dark to find out what the Trojans are planning. Diomedes volunteers and chooses Odysseus to go with him, and they put on leather instead of bronze. Odysseus takes a cap made of leather with rows of boar's tusks stitched into it, and they go out over the ditch, and they hear a heron cry on their right in the dark, and take it as a blessing. And the Trojans, at the same hour, have had the same idea. Hector offers a chariot and the 2 best horses in the Greek army to anyone who will go and spy on the ships. A man named Dolon takes it. He is rich and he is fast, and he is not much of a fighter, and he asks for the payment up front. He wants Achilles' horses and Achilles' chariot, and Hector swears an oath he has no ability to keep, and Dolon puts on a wolfskin and a cap of weasel hide and goes. They hear him coming and lie down flat among the corpses and let him go past, then get up and run him down. And Dolon, caught in the dark between 2 armies, does exactly what a man does. He begs. He tells them there is bronze and gold and iron in his father's house, and any amount of ransom. And then, because they ask, he tells them everything, and more than everything. He tells them which contingents are asleep and where the watches are thin. And then he tells them, helpfully, that a Thracian king named Rhesus arrived only today, on the very edge of the camp, with the biggest and whitest horses he has ever seen and armor worked in gold and silver. And then he asks them, again, to take him back to the ships and tie him up somewhere and ransom him. And Diomedes cuts his throat while he is still speaking. Homer puts it exactly like that. The words were still in him. They hang the wolfskin and the cap and the bow up in a tamarisk bush and break some branches, so they will find it again on the way back. And then they walk into the Thracian camp, where the men have arrived exhausted and gone straight to sleep with their armor stacked in 3 neat rows beside them, and their horses tied to the chariot rails. Diomedes goes down the line, 12 men, and then the king in his sleep. And Odysseus walks behind him and takes hold of each body by the foot and drags it out of the way, clearing a path, so that when he leads the white horses out, they will not shy at stepping over men, because these horses have never been in a war and are not used to it. Athena tells them to stop while they are still ahead. They take the horses and go, and behind them a man wakes up in the dark and finds his cousin dead beside him and starts screaming. And they come back over the ditch and are met with shouting and handshakes and questions. Then the 2 of them walk down to the sea. They go into the water up to their thighs and wash the sweat off their necks and their thighs and their backs, and then go up and get into proper baths and oil themselves, and sit down and eat something and pour a little wine out for Athena. It is not yet light. The rest of the camp is asleep behind them. Nobody else is awake to see 2 men standing waist deep in cold black water, at the end of a night's work, getting clean. The next day is the longest day in the poem, and it takes 5 whole books to get through, and at the end of it, the Greeks are fighting on the decks of their own ships. It starts well for them. Agamemnon arms himself, and Homer takes his time over every piece of it, and then the man has the morning of his life. He goes through the Trojan line and does not stop. 2 brothers in a chariot, sons of Priam, who had been captured by Achilles once and ransomed and sent home. And here they are again, and this time nobody is ransoming anybody. 2 more brothers, whose father had taken Paris money to argue against ever giving Helen back. And Agamemnon cuts the arms off one of them and takes off his head, and sends the trunk rolling away through the crowd like a log. Then a young man called Iphidumus comes at him, who was married so recently that he had not had any joy of it yet, and his spear bends on Agamemnon's belt like soft lead, and Agamemnon kills him and stands over him, and the boy's older brother sees it from the side, and puts a spear straight through Agamemnon's forearm. And that is the end of the morning. He kills the brother too, and goes on fighting for a while, and then the wound cools and starts to hurt properly, and the pain gets sharp as a labor pain, and he gets into his chariot and tells the driver to go, and he leaves. And Hector, who has been waiting for exactly that, comes forward. What happens over the next few hours is the Greek army being taken apart one name at a time. Diomedes is shot through the foot by Paris, the arrow pinning him to the ground, and he pulls it out and goes back to the ships. Odysseus is left completely alone in the middle of the field, which he thinks about for a moment out loud, and then surrounds himself with his shield and stands. And they come at him the way hounds and hunters come at a boar in a wood. And a man puts a spear through his ribs, and Odysseus kills him and starts shouting for help. And Menelaus and Ajax come and get him out, with Ajax standing over him like a wall while he goes. Mucaean, the doctor, the only man in the army who can take an arrowhead out properly, is shot in the shoulder by Paris, and old Nestor puts him in his chariot and drives him back. And Eurypylus is hit in the thigh with an arrow, and starts limping towards the ships with the arrow still in the muscle. And Achilles, who has been sitting up by his own ships for days doing nothing, sees a chariot coming past with a wounded man in it, and cannot tell who the wounded man is. So he calls his friend out of the hut. Homer says it plainly, and there is nothing after it, no flourish. Patroclus came out when he was called, and that was the beginning of his death. He is sent to Nestor's hut to ask one question: who is hurt? And Nestor, who is old and who has been waiting 9 years for exactly this opening, takes his time. He gets the young man to sit down. He offers him a drink, and then he talks about the wounded, and about his own youth, and about what an army looks like when it starts to come apart, and he ends up in exactly the place he has been steering towards the whole time. Persuade him, Nestor says, and if you cannot persuade him, then ask him to let you go out yourself, in his armor, with his men behind you. Let them look across the field, and see that armor coming, and think it is him. The Trojans might pull back out of sheer fear, and that is all we need, 1 hour of breathing. And Patroclus does not answer him. He gets up and runs back along the ships to tell Achilles. And on the way he meets Eurypylus limping in from the field with an arrow in his thigh, and stops. He stops. He puts his arm under him and takes him into a hut and lays him down and cuts the arrow out of the thigh with a knife and washes the wound with warm water and crushes a bitter root between his hands and puts it on. And the pain goes out of the man and the blood stops. And he stays with him. That is the whole reason he is not with Achilles for the rest of the day, and it is why everything that happens next happens. Out on the plain, the Trojans reach the ditch, and the horses will not cross it. It is too wide, and there are sharpened stakes at the bottom, and no horse in the world will go down into that. So they leave the chariots at the top and go in on foot in 5 columns and start climbing. Sarpedon, the Lycian, who is a son of Zeus and knows it, says the thing to Glaucus that every soldier in every army has had said to them in some form. He says, why do we get the best seats, and the meat, and the full cups, and the big estate by the river with the orchard and the wheat? Why do the people look at us like gods? Because of this. Because we stand in front. We either take a city today, or somebody takes ours. Come on. And on the wall the Greeks hold. 2 men from Thessaly stand in a gateway like a pair of oak trees with their roots in and refuse to move, and the stones come down off the parapets in a fall like snow. Then an eagle goes over the Trojan army on the left with a live snake in its talons, and the snake bends back and bites it in the neck, and the eagle drops it into the middle of the men and flies off crying, and the snake lies there among them, alive. And Polydamas, who is the only man in Troy who consistently reads these things correctly, tells Hector what it means. It means we get in, and then we do not get out. Pull back. And Hector says, I do not care about birds. I do not care whether they go left or right, or which way they were flying. I have a word from Zeus himself. And then he tells him that if he catches him talking that way again, he will kill him personally. And then Hector picks up a stone. Homer says it was pointed at the top and thick at the base, and lay in front of the gates, and that two of the strongest men alive today could not lever it up onto a wagon, and that Zeus made it light for him. And he sets his feet apart, so the throw will have everything in it, and puts it through the doors. The bolts go, the hinges go, the planks split apart, and the stone goes on through and lands inside. And Hector comes through the gap with his face like sudden night, with two spears in his hands, and bronze all over him and his eyes with fire in them, and stands in the broken gateway of his enemy's wall and calls the Trojan army in after him. They still do not get the ships that day. It takes another 2 books, because the god of the sea decides to disobey his brother. Zeus has turned his eyes away, satisfied, to watch other countries, and Poseidon comes across the water from the north in 4 enormous strides, and stables his horses in a cave under the sea, and walks into the Greek camp in the shape of a prophet, and starts putting the fight back into them. So the day grinds. It grinds for hours. Idomeneus, who is grey at the temples and past his best, has a long and unexpectedly good afternoon in the middle of the line. Men are killed, and their armor taken, and their bodies dragged back and forth. The fighting goes along the ships in a long grinding pressure with no shape to it, and Homer stops naming the famous men for a while and simply lets you hear it. Bronze on bronze, and men shouting, and the sound of the sea behind it all, and the dust hanging. And then Hera decides to help, and she does it by putting her husband to sleep. She goes to her room and shuts the doors, which nobody else can open, and washes herself, and rubs oil into her skin that is scented so strongly that when she moves the smell reaches heaven and earth at the same time. She combs her hair and braids it and lets it fall shining. She puts on a robe that Athena made her and pins it at the breast with gold brooches, and puts on a belt with 100 tassels and earrings with 3 drops in each, and a veil like new sunlight and good sandals. Then she goes to Aphrodite and tells her a lie, that she needs the charm of love to reconcile an old married couple, far away at the ends of the earth, who have not spoken to each other in a long time. And Aphrodite, who is not suspicious, unties the embroidered band from her own breast and hands it over. Everything is in it, she says. Longing and the sweet talk, and the thing that turns sensible men stupid. Then Hera goes and finds Sleep and asks him to help her, and he says absolutely not. He has done this once before and got in trouble for it. So she offers him a golden throne and a footstool, and he says no. And then she offers him one of the young graces to marry, and he says yes. And she goes up the mountain to where Zeus is sitting, and he sees her coming, and he wants her so badly that he does not ask her a single useful question. And he wraps the two of them in a golden cloud, and where they lie down the earth sends up fresh grass and crocus, and soft hyacinth thick enough to hold them off the ground, and dew falls out of the cloud around them. And afterwards he goes to sleep with his arm over her. Sleep runs down to the sea and tells Poseidon he has the field, and the Greeks come forward with everything they have, and Ajax picks up a stone out of the ballast pile by the ships and hits Hector in the chest under the neck with it, and Hector goes over backwards like an oak coming down, spinning like a top with the spear coming out of his hand, and they carry him off the field vomiting blood, and he faints in his friend's arms by the river. For about an hour, the Trojans give ground everywhere. Then Zeus wakes up. He sits up on the mountain and looks down and sees Hector lying on the plain with his friends around him, breathing badly. And he understands the whole thing immediately, and he is very angry, and he does something he almost never does. He tells his wife exactly what is going to happen now, from here to the end, out loud, in order. Hector will get up, he says, and drive them all the way back to the ships. And Achilles will send Patroclus out, and Hector will kill Patroclus in front of Troy, after Patroclus has killed a great many men, including a son of mine. And out of grief for Patroclus, Achilles will come back and kill Hector. And after that, and not before, the Greeks will take Troy. Every important thing that is left in the poem is in that speech, and there are 9 books to go, and knowing does not help anybody. So Poseidon is pulled off the field, resentful and obedient, and Apollo goes down and stands over Hector where he is lying, and asks him who he is, and puts the breath back into him, and then walks in front of the Trojan army, holding a thing that no army can look at, and the Greek line simply comes apart. They cross the ditch. Apollo pushes the parapet down with his hands. Homer says, the way a child at the seaside builds up sand and then knocks it flat again with his feet and his hands for fun. And the fighting comes onto the ships. Ajax is up on the decks with a boarding pike 30 feet long, and he goes along the sterns from one ship to the next, jumping the gaps, keeping the fire off. 12 men come at the hulls, and he puts 12 of them down in front of the prows. He is shouting at the army the whole time, which is not something he usually does, and what he is shouting is arithmetic. There is no city behind us. There is no wall behind us. There is water behind us. This is it. And Hector gets a hand on the stern of a ship, the first one they ever beached here, 9 years ago. He takes hold of it and does not let go, and starts calling for fire. And Ajax steps back one deck, and then one more, still up there, still on his feet, still not down. Patroclus comes back up the beach and stands in front of Achilles and cries. Homer says he was crying the way water comes down a rock face, dark water running over stone, and Achilles sees him coming like that and feels sorry for him and asks him what has happened. Is it something from home? Is your father dead? Is mine? Or are you crying about the Greeks, dying beside their own ships because of what they did? And Patroclus tells him, Diomedes wounded, Odysseus wounded, Agamemnon wounded, Eurypylus with an arrow in his thigh, which he knows because he cut it out himself. Everybody who could hold that line is on their back in a hut. And then he says, your father was a good man and your mother is a goddess, but there is something in you that is not right. You will not use any of it. Let me go instead. Give me your armor and let me take your men out. And they will look across the field and see that armor coming, and they will think you have come back, and they might give us an hour. And Homer stops the scene for one sentence, and the sentence has nothing decorative in it at all. He says, that is what he asked for, begging, and he was asking for his own death, and he did not know it. Achilles says yes, and the way he says it is worth hearing, because there is no prophecy in it and no reluctance about the fighting. He says, it is not any word from Zeus that has kept me here, and it is not anything my mother told me. It is that a man of my own side took what was mine in front of everybody and treated me like nothing. Let it go. I cannot be angry forever. Then he gives him the armor and the men and one condition. Drive them off the ships, he says, and come back. When you have got the fire away from the hulls, come back to me. Do not go on across the plain. Do not go towards the city, whatever it looks like out there and however well it is going, because Apollo loves the Trojans and you will not be able to see him. Push them off and come straight back. And then he says something strange and cold that people rarely quote, and it belongs to him. I wish every Trojan would die, and every Greek too, and only the two of us were left alive, so that we could pull the walls of Troy down by ourselves. While they are talking, a ship starts burning at the far end of the beach. Achilles sees the smoke and hits his thighs with both hands and tells him to hurry. So Patroclus arms, and Homer walks you through every piece of it, because there is only one thing he wants you to notice, and he saves it for last. The greaves, the breastplate, the silver-studded sword, the great shield, the helmet with the horsehair, 2 spears that fit his hands. And then he did not take the spear, the one from Achilles' father, the long ash spear cut on a mountain in Thessaly, because it was heavy, and there was no other man in the army who could even lift it, let alone use it. He takes everything, except the one thing that would have saved him. The driver yokes the 2 immortal horses, and beside them a mortal horse to run in the traces, and Achilles goes down the beach and calls out the Myrmidons, 50 ships, 50 men out of each of them, and they come out and put themselves in order and pack in tight, shield against shield, helmet against helmet, like a wall built with stones fitted so well that no wind gets through. And before they go, Achilles goes back into the hut, and this is the part I want to slow down for. He opens a chest that his mother packed for him a long time ago when he sailed. It has tunics in it, and cloaks, and rugs against the wind, and there is a cup in the bottom of it that nobody else is allowed to drink out of, and which he only ever uses for one thing. He cleans it with sulphur and rinses it, and washes his hands, and then goes out and stands in the middle of the yard and pours wine on the ground and looks up. And he prays for 2 things. Let him win out there, and bring him back to me, safely, with all his armor and all my men. Homer says Zeus heard him, and gave him one of the 2, and refused the other. Then they go out, and it works. The Trojans see that armor coming, and their line bends in the middle. Every man on that field looks up and sees the same thing, and what every one of them thinks is the same thought, and it is wrong. Somebody says it out loud, and then the whole army is moving backwards. You are wearing another man's armor. It fits you. That is the strangest part, that it simply fits, and that the weight of it sits where you expected it to sit. But something else is happening that you did not plan for, which is that you can feel the effect of yourself. Men who were finished 10 seconds ago are getting up. The line ahead of you is straightening because of who they think is coming. You can hear his name being shouted in front of you and behind you, and it is not your name, and nobody is looking at your face, and there is a lift in your chest that has nothing to do with courage. You have never been this useful in your life. They put the fire out. They drive the Trojans back off the ships and out over the ditch, and the chariots break up in it, and the horses scream in the stakes, and Achilles' 2 immortal horses go over the gap without touching it. And then Patroclus keeps going. The first man who turns and stands is Sarpedon, the Lycian, the one who made the speech about why the men who get the wine stand in the front. He tells his people to be ashamed of themselves and gets down out of his chariot. And up on the mountain, his father watches him do it. Sarpedon is a son of Zeus, and Zeus sits there and considers taking him off the field alive. He says so out loud. He is genuinely working out whether to do it. And Hera tells him no, and her reason is administrative and unanswerable. She says, there are sons of gods all over that plain. If you take yours out, every one of the others will want the same for theirs, and you will never hear the end of it. Let him die where he is fighting, and when he is dead, send sleep and death to pick him up and carry him home to Lycia, and let his own people bury him with a mound and a stone, because that is what the dead get. And Zeus agrees with his wife, and lets his son die, and while it happens, he sends down rain the color of blood over the whole plain. Sarpedon throws first, and misses, and kills the mortal horse in the traces. Then Patroclus puts a spear through him, in the middle of the body where the heart is, and Sarpedon goes down like a tree. And with the last thing he calls to Glaucus and says, "Do not let them strip me. Do not let the Greeks take my armor. Stand over me." They fight over his body for a long time. The dust goes over him so thickly that Homer says his own mother would not have known him, and men crawl over each other around him like flies round a milk pail. And then Apollo comes down and picks him up out of it, and carries him out of the battle and down to the river, and washes the blood off him, and rubs him with oil that does not spoil, and puts clean clothes on him, and hands him to Sleep and Death, the two brothers, who carry him home to Lycia between them in no time at all, which leaves Patroclus out there in the middle of the plain with the enemy running and his blood up, and one instruction in his head that he has stopped hearing. He goes forward. Homer tells you the mistake plainly. If he had done what Achilles told him, he would have got out of it alive. He kills 9 men in a run. He gets all the way to the wall of Troy itself, and goes at the angle of the stonework 3 separate times, climbing, and 3 times something puts 2 hands on his shield and pushes him back down. And the 3rd time a voice comes out of nothing and says, "Get back. This city is not going to fall to your spear. It is not going to fall to Achilles either, and he is a much better man than you." And he goes back, but he does not go home. He kills Hector's driver with a stone that smashes the forehead, and the man goes off the chariot head first with his eyes out in the dust in front of him, and Homer says he dived like a diver, and then Patroclus stands over him and jokes about it, and that is not a thing this poem lets a man do without an invoice arriving. Because now Apollo is walking through the crowd towards his back, wrapped in mist. And what happens next is the most frightening passage in the Iliad, and it is frightening because nobody touches him. The god comes up behind him and hits him between the shoulders with the flat of his hand. The helmet comes off his head. It goes rolling away under the horse's feet, and the plumes fill up with dust and blood. And Homer says that before that day it had never been permitted for that helmet to be dirtied, because it had always been on Achilles' head. Then the spear breaks in his hands, not against anything. It simply comes apart, the heavy ash shaft with the bronze on the end of it in his own grip. The shield with its strap falls off his arm onto the ground, and the breastplate opens because the god undoes it. And he stands there in the middle of a battlefield with no helmet, no spear, no shield, and no armor on his chest. And Homer says his mind stopped and his legs went out from under him. A Trojan named Euphorbus, who has never done anything before and will never do anything again, walks up behind him and puts a spear into his back between the shoulders and pulls it out and runs away into the crowd, in case Patroclus turns round. He is already going down when Hector reaches him. Hector comes through the ranks and stands over him and drives a spear into his stomach and out the other side, and Patroclus falls. And Homer says the whole Greek army groaned when he hit the ground. Then Hector stands over him and boasts. He tells him he came here thinking he would sack Troy and carry the women home in his ships, and he was a fool, and that the vultures are going to eat him here. And Patroclus, dying, with a spear hole through him, says the truest thing anybody says out loud in this poem. He says, "Do not stand there being pleased with yourself. You did not beat me. Zeus and Apollo beat me, and they took my armor off my body with their own hands before anyone came near me. And men like Euphorbus finished it, and you are 20th in the queue at best." And then he says, "And I will tell you something. You are not going to live long. Death is already standing right next to you. You will go down at the hands of Achilles." And he dies while he is saying it. And Homer writes that the soul went out of him and down to the dead, crying for its own youth, for what it was losing. And Hector, standing over him, says, "Maybe I will kill Achilles first." Then he pulls the spear out of the body, and goes off after the horses. What follows is the worst hour of the war, and it is entirely about a corpse. Menelaus gets there first and stands over the body with his shield out and kills Euphorbus. And then Hector comes, and Menelaus knows what he is and backs away to find Ajax. And while he is gone, Hector strips the armor off Patroclus, and then he puts it on. Homer takes a moment for Zeus watching this. He looks down and sees a mortal man buckling on the armor of a goddess's son, and he pities him, that is the word, and says to himself that this man has no idea how close his own death is, and that his wife is never going to take that armor off his shoulders when he comes home. And then, because he is that kind of god, he makes the armor fit him perfectly and fills him with strength. So the fight over the body goes on for the rest of the day, back and forth in a small trampled space, with the two Ajaxes and Menelaus and Meriones holding on to a dead man's arms and legs, and men dying on top of him. And in the middle of it, Homer lifts his eyes and shows you something off to one side. Achilles' two immortal horses have come out of the fighting and stopped. They will not move. They are standing there with their heads down and their manes in the dust, and they are crying for their driver. And Homer says they stood as still as a stone pillar over a man's grave. Their new driver hits them with the whip and shouts at them and pleads with them, and they will not move an inch. And Zeus looks at them and says, "Why did I ever give the two of you to a mortal family, when you cannot die and everything you love does?" By evening, they get the body out. Menelaus and Meriones pick it up and run for the ships with it, and Ajax turns round behind them and holds the whole Trojan army off with his shield, while the fire follows them across the plain. And somewhere in front of them, on the sand, running, there is a young man called Antilochus, who has been sent up the beach with the news because somebody has to tell him. He runs past the ships with his hands empty, and Homer does not describe the running. He describes the camp going quiet ahead of him as he goes, hut by hut, men standing up out of what they were doing and turning to watch him pass, and understanding, and saying nothing at all. Achilles is already frightened when Antilochus reaches him. He has been standing between the huts watching the Greeks come apart out there, and something in him has begun putting it together, and he is saying to himself, "My mother told me once that the best of the Myrmidons would die while I was still alive. Surely he did not go on. Surely he came back when I told him." And then the young man is in front of him, crying so hard he can barely say it, and he says it in 11 words. Patroclus is lying dead. They are fighting over his naked body. Hector has your armor. And this is the loudest place in the poem, and Homer writes it almost entirely without sound. A black cloud of grief comes down over him. He takes ash out of the fire with both hands and pours it over his own head and over his face, and it goes all through his hair and down his clothes. Then he lies down in the dirt, full length, and takes hold of his hair and pulls it out. The women in the huts come running out and scream, and Antilochus kneels down and holds both of Achilles' hands, and Homer tells you why he does it, because he was afraid he was going to cut his own throat. And then Achilles makes a sound, and his mother hears it at the bottom of the sea, sitting beside her father in the depths. She hears her son crying above her through all that water, and she screams, and the sea goddesses come to her out of the caves, all of them, and Homer names them one after another like a roll being read, 30 of them, and they stand around her in the silver cave, beating their breasts. And then she comes up out of the water and along the beach to where her child is lying in the ashes. She puts her hand on his head and asks him why he is crying, and reminds him, gently and with terrible timing, that Zeus did exactly what he asked for. The Greeks were penned against the ships. They did miss him. It all happened the way you wanted. And Achilles says, "Yes, he did all of it. And what use is any of it to me now? when the man I loved best in the world is dead. Then he says, I do not want to be alive. I have no interest in it, unless Hector dies first on the end of my spear. And Thetis says the thing she has to say, which she has known since before he was born. She says, then your own death is very close, my child. You do not have long after his. And he says, let it come. He says it fast, and he means it. And then he tells her the rest, which is worse. He says, he died calling for me, and I was not there. I was sitting by my ships being useless, while my friend was killed. And I wish the whole idea of quarreling would disappear out of the world, out of gods and out of men, because look what it does. Now I am going to find the man who killed him, and then I will take whatever comes. He has no armor. It is on Hector. So a goddess comes down to tell him, it does not matter tonight. Just show yourself at the ditch, she says. Stand where they can see you. That is enough. And he walks down to the edge of the ditch with nothing on, and Athena puts her own terrible shield across his shoulders and sets a golden cloud round his head with fire coming off the top of it, and he stands there and shouts. He shouts 3 times. Athena's voice goes out with his, and out on the plain, men who have been fighting all day over a body here, something come across the water at them and go to pieces. The horses turn the chariots round in the crush. 12 men die in the tangle of their own wheels and their own spears, without anyone touching them. And in that gap, the Greeks pick Patroclus up and carry him back and lay him on a bier. And Achilles walks beside him the whole way with the tears running down, and the 2 immortal horses walk behind, crying too. Then Hera hurries the sun down into the ocean early, because the day has gone on long enough. 2 councils that night, on either side of the ditch. On the Trojan side, Polydamas says the same thing for the second time in 3 days. He says, we should go inside the walls tonight, all of us, because tomorrow that man is coming out, and if he finds us here in the open, we will be fighting him on ground of his choosing, and some of us will get inside the gates, and some of us will not. And Hector will not have it. He is angry that it was even suggested. He says he is tired of being penned inside stone, that Troy has spent its wealth on this war, that they have won today and they will win tomorrow, and that if Achilles comes out, then he will stand and face him, and one of them will take the glory, and it might just as well be him. And the army cheers him. Homer's comment is 1 line, and it is the coldest line in the book. Athena had taken their wits away. On the beach they wash Patroclus. They heat water and wash the blood off him, and rub him with oil and put ointment in the wounds, and lay him on a bed, and cover him from head to foot in linen, with a white cloth over that. And the Myrmidons stand round him and cry all night. And Achilles puts his hands on his friend's chest and makes a promise, and part of it is a decent promise, and part of it is not. He says, I am not going to bury you until I have brought Hector's armor here and his head with it, and I am going to cut the throats of 12 Trojan boys in front of your fire, because I am that angry about your death. He means it. He does it. Hold on to that too. Meanwhile, his mother has gone up to the house of Hephaestus, the smith of the gods, the crippled one, and she finds him at work, sweating over 20 tripods on golden wheels that are built to roll into the hall by themselves when the gods want a meal and roll out again afterwards. He owes her everything. When he was thrown out of heaven as a baby for taking his mother's side, she was the one who caught him and kept him, and he has not forgotten it, and he tells her so and asks her what she wants. And she cries and tells him her son's story from the beginning and asks for armor. And he says the truest thing any of the gods say in this poem. He says, I wish I could hide him from death as easily as I can make him armor. But at least he will have armor that people will stop and look at. Then he goes to the forge and turns 20 bellows on the fire, and they blow at whatever strength he tells them to blow. And he throws in bronze and tin and gold and silver, and puts the anvil on its block, and takes his hammer in one hand and his tongs in the other. And he makes the shield, and Homer describes it for 130 lines, and this is the most famous single object in Western literature, and I want to walk you round it slowly, because that is what it is for. He makes it 5 layers thick, with 3 bright rims round the edge and a silver strap. And on it he puts the earth, and the sky, and the sea, and the sun going, and the full moon, and all the constellations that turn over your head at night, including the one that goes round and never goes down into the ocean. And then he puts 2 cities on it. In the first city there is a wedding. There are torches, and they are bringing the bride out of her father's house through the streets, and there is a wedding song going, and flutes and lyres, and young men dancing round and round, and the women are standing in their own doorways watching them go past. And in the marketplace of that same city, in the middle of the same day, there is an argument. 2 men are in dispute over the blood price for a man who has been killed. One says he has paid it, and the other says he has had nothing. And there is a crowd taking sides, and heralds holding them back, and the elders of the city sitting on polished stone in a sacred circle, and 2 bars of gold lying in the middle for whichever of them gives the fairest judgment. That is a city at peace, not a city without death, and not a city without anger, a city with a courtroom. And around the second city there are 2 armies camped, and they are arguing about whether to storm it and burn it or to accept half of everything inside it and go away. And the people inside will not agree to either. So while the walls are being held by the old men and the women and the children, the fighting men go out secretly and set an ambush by a river where the cattle come down to drink. And they kill 2 herdsmen and take the flocks, and the noise reaches the armies, and there is a battle on the riverbank with real men fighting on the metal, and moving among them, Homer says, are strife and panic and death. And death has hold of a man by the foot and is dragging him out by it, and her clothes are red at the back with men's blood. Then he leaves the cities, and after that there is no more war anywhere on the shield. There is a field being ploughed, soft and wide, and it is being ploughed for the 3rd time, and there are men going up and down it, turning the teams at the end of every furrow. And at the headland, a man stands with a cup of sweet wine and hands it to each of them as they come round, and the gold of the metal goes black behind the plough as it turns, which is the cleverest thing in the whole description. There is a harvest, reapers going down a field of barley with sickles, and behind them men binding sheaves, and behind them 3 boys gathering up armfuls and passing them along, and the landowner standing there among them, holding his staff, saying nothing, glad. And under an oak tree at the edge of the field, heralds are cooking an ox for the meal, and women are shaking out barley for the workers' supper. There is a vineyard, heavy, made of gold, and the grapes on it are dark, and the poles holding the vines are silver. And there is a blue ditch round it, and a fence of tin, and one single path leading in. And along that path there are girls and boys carrying baskets of fruit. And in the middle of them there is a boy playing a lyre and singing in a thin, sweet voice. And all of them are following him, stamping and singing as they go. There is a herd of cattle going out along a loud river through the reeds, with the herdsmen walking beside them, and 9 dogs. And 2 lions have got hold of the biggest bull, and are dragging him off bellowing, and the men are shouting and setting the dogs on them, and the dogs will not go in. They run up close and bark, and jump back and bark. There is a valley full of sheep, with folds and shelters and huts. And then, last, there is a dancing floor, like the one that was made for a princess in Crete a long time before all this. And on the dancing floor there are young men and girls dancing, holding each other by the wrist. The girls are in fine linen with garlands. The young men have knives of gold on silver belts, and sometimes they run round and round in a ring, quick and light. the way a potter's wheel goes when he spins it with his hand to see if it is true. And sometimes they run in two long lines towards each other, and there is a crowd standing round the dancing floor enjoying it, and two acrobats spinning and tumbling in the middle to lead the song. And round the outermost edge of the whole thing, holding all of it in, he puts the great river ocean. Walk it once more, and take your time, because this is the last quiet place in the poem. You are looking at a wedding at night, with torches, and you can hear the flutes from 3 streets away. You are looking at two old men arguing about money in front of a jury, and getting it settled. You are looking at a man handing a cup of wine to a ploughman at the end of a furrow, and the ploughman drinking it, and turning the oxen round, and going back down the field. You are looking at a boy playing a lyre badly and beautifully at a grape harvest, with everybody following him. You are looking at dogs that will bark at lions, but will not bite them. You are looking at girls in linen, holding boys by the wrist, and running in a circle on a smooth floor, while people stand round and watch, and are pleased. That is what is on the shield. Almost all of it is ordinary life. Weddings, courts, farms, orchards, animals dancing. And it is being made all night by a god working at speed, to be carried tomorrow morning by a man who is going out to kill somebody, and who is going to die shortly afterwards, and who will never see any of it again. He makes the breastplate after that, brighter than fire, and the helmet with the golden crest, and the greaves of tin. And in the morning his mother takes the whole set, and comes down off the mountain with it like a hawk off a rock face, and lays it on the ground in front of her son. The armor makes a noise as it comes down, and every one of the myrmidons flinches away from it. Not one of them can look at it. They actually turn their heads. And Achilles looks at it, and his eyes come up like flame out of a fire, and he is glad. And then, holding a god's work in his hands, the first thing he says is about the flies. He says, I am afraid the flies will get into his wounds while I am gone. And his mother says, I will keep him. And she puts a drop of the god's food, and the gods drink into the dead man's nose, so that nothing can touch him. Then there is an assembly on the beach, and the quarrel is ended, and it takes about 5 minutes, and everybody is limping. Achilles stands up and says, was any of this worth it for the sake of one girl? I wish she had died on the day I took her. Let it be finished. I am putting my anger away. Get the men out. And Agamemnon speaks from where he is sitting, because his arm will not let him stand, and he apologizes the way a certain kind of man apologizes. He says it was not really him. There is a thing called delusion, the eldest daughter of Zeus, who walks over men's heads and puts a mist on them, and she got into him that day. And even Zeus himself has been caught by her once over the birth of Heracles. So it was her. But here are the gifts. And Achilles could take that apart in a sentence, and does not, because he no longer has the appetite. He says, give them or keep them, whichever you like. Let us go and fight. Odysseus is the one who slows it down, and he is right too. He says, the men have not eaten. You cannot send an army out on nothing since dawn, because one man is not hungry. Bring the gifts out in front of everybody, and let the oath be sworn in public, so it is properly finished, and then let the whole army have breakfast. So they bring it out and count it in front of the army, the tripods, the cauldrons, the gold, the horses, the 7 women, and Agamemnon takes a knife and cuts the throat of a boar and swears out loud that he never once laid a hand on Briseis, and the herald swings the dead boar and throws it into the sea for the fish. And Briseis is brought back and walks up the beach to the huts she was taken from. And the first thing she does is find the body. She goes to where Patroclus is lying under his white linen, and she throws herself down on him and cries, and what she says is not about Achilles at all. She says, you were kind to me, and she remembers what he told her, that he was going to take her home to Thessaly and make her a proper wife with a proper wedding. And she says, "And now you are dead, and I have nothing but one grief after another for the whole of my life." Achilles will not eat. The old men come and stand round him and try, and he tells them that food and drink mean nothing to him until sunset, and that his throat will take nothing until he has done what he is going to do. So Athena comes down without telling him and puts nectar and ambrosia into his chest, so that his strength will not go out of him from hunger, because she can see the day coming. Then he arms in front of everybody. He puts on the greaves and the breastplate, and hangs the sword, and takes up the great shield, and the light comes off it, and goes up like a signal fire seen out at sea. He puts on the helmet, and it sits like a star on his head, and he tries the armor by moving in it, and it does not weigh on him at all. Homer says it was like wings under him, lifting him. And then he takes his father's spear out of its case, the ash spear from the mountain, the one no other man in the army can lift, and nobody else touches it. The drivers yoke the horses, and Achilles gets up into the chariot behind them, shining, and speaks to the animals, and what he says to them is bitter. He says, "Bring me back this time. Do not leave me out. They're the way you left Patroclus." And one of them answers him. Hera gives the horse a voice for a moment. He drops his head so that his mane comes right down out of the yoke pad and touches the ground, and he says, "We will save you today, this time, and we will run faster than any wind you have ever felt. But your own death is close, and it will not be our fault, and it was not our fault before. It was a great god and a hard fate that killed Patroclus, and when you go down, it will be a god and a man together who do it." And that is all he is allowed to say, because the Furies come and take the voice away from him. And Achilles is not surprised. That is the thing to hold on to as he drives out. He does not argue, and he does not flinch. He says, "Why are you telling me about my own death? I know about it. I know I am going to die here, far away from my mother and my father, and I am not stopping until they have had enough of me." Then he shouts at them, and they go. The first thing that happens is that the rules come off. Zeus calls the gods together and tells them they may all go down now and fight on whichever side they like, because if Achilles is let loose on that plain unopposed, he will go through the wall of Troy against fate itself. So they go down, and they pair off. Poseidon against Apollo, Athena against Ares, Hera against Artemis, and the earth shakes so hard when they arrive that the god of the dead, underneath everything, is frightened that the ground is going to crack open above him and let the daylight in. And then, underneath all of that, there is one man walking up the plain looking for one other man. Aeneas is pushed at him first, and survives it because the sea takes him off the field bodily and throws him over the heads of the fighting. After that there is a stretch of the poem that is difficult to read at any speed, and I am not going to pretend it is beautiful. Achilles goes through them, a spear through a helmet, and the brains come out inside the bronze. A man taken from behind in the back, a man called Tros, who runs up and takes hold of his knees and begs, hoping to be taken alive because they are nearly the same age, and Achilles opens him with the sword, a spear in one ear and out the other, a sword down through the crown of a head, and the whole blade comes out warm, an arm cut off at the shoulder, and the hand still holding the spear as it falls. Homer compares him to a forest fire in the mountains going up the ravines with the wind behind it, and then to a threshing floor where the oxen tread the barley, and it all comes apart. And he says the axle of the chariot was spattered up to the rail, and the wheels were throwing blood off them as they turned. And in the middle of that there is a boy called Polydorus, and he is Priam's youngest son. His father had never let him fight. He was the youngest and the best loved, and he had been kept back deliberately, and he had come out this morning without permission because he was fast, and he wanted people to see it. and he is running along the front of the line, showing off his speed, when Achilles puts a spear through him from behind, in at the navel, and out the other side. And he goes down on his knees in the dirt in front of the walls of his own city, and holds his own insides in his hands. Hector sees his little brother do that. And Hector, who has been avoiding this for 2 days on good advice, comes straight across the field at him, and they exchange one throw each, and Athena turns Hector's spear aside with a breath, and Apollo puts a fog round him and takes him away, and Achilles goes into the fog 3 separate times, stabbing at it, and comes out shouting. By the middle of the afternoon, he has driven half the Trojan army into the river. They go in because there is nowhere else, and he goes in after them with the sword, and the water bends round the bodies. And here he stops long enough to do one piece of business. He pulls 12 young Trojan men out of the river alive, and has their hands tied behind them, and sends them back to the ships. They are for the fire. He has told his friend he will do it, and he is doing it. And then, in the shallows, another of Priam's sons drags himself out of the water in front of him. His name is Lycaon, and this man has already been through Achilles' hands once. Achilles caught him in a vineyard at night a while ago, cutting fig branches for chariot rails, and sold him as a slave on an island, and he escaped, and he got home 12 days ago. 12 days. He comes out of the water half drowned, and he does not run, because there is no point. He takes hold of Achilles' knees with both hands while the spear is over his head, and he says, I am a suppliant, respected, and take the ransom. My father is rich, and I am not from the same mother as Hector, if that matters to you. And Achilles gives him an answer that is one of the great, terrible speeches. And it is terrible because every word of it is true and reasonable. He says, before Patroclus died, I used to prefer taking men alive. I sold a great many of you. Now there is not one of you who is going to get away from me in front of this city, and least of all Priam's sons. And then he says, and he uses the word, friend. Friend, you die too. Why not? Patroclus died, and he was worth a great deal more than you are. And look at me. Look at how big I am, and how good to look at. My father is a king, and my mother is a goddess, and death is standing over me as well, and a hard fate, and it will come in the morning or at midday or in the evening, and somebody will take my life too, with a spear or with an arrow off a string. Then he kills him and throws him in the water. That is the sentence the last quarter of this poem turns on, not the killing, the word friend. The river itself finally objects. It rises up against him, choked with dead men, and comes at him in a wave with the bodies rolling in it. And Achilles grabs an elm tree on the bank, and the whole tree tears out and falls across the current, and he runs for the plain with the water chasing him across open ground, and it takes a god throwing fire at the water to make it stop. And after that, at the very end of the afternoon, one Trojan stands still in front of the gates and holds him up for 3 minutes so the rest of them can get in. And Apollo takes that man's shape and lets Achilles chase him away up the plain, on and on. And by the time Achilles works out he has been chasing a god, the whole Trojan army has poured in through the gates behind him, and the gates are shut. All of them but one. Hector is standing outside the wall, in front of the great gate, on his own. His father is up on the tower above him and sees Achilles coming across the plain, and Homer says he was bright, like the star that comes up at harvest time and gives the clearest light of any of them, and is called a bad sign. And the old man cries out to his son, and puts his hands up, and begs him, come inside the wall. Do not stand out there on your own waiting for that man, because he is stronger than you. And he tells him what it costs. He says, he has killed so many of my sons already. 2 of them are missing since this morning, and I cannot find them anywhere. And if you die out there, then everything goes, the city, the people, me. and I will be the one who lives longest and sees all of it. I will see my sons killed, and my daughters dragged away, and the rooms emptied, and the little children thrown down off the towers. And at the very end of it, at my own door, the dogs I fed at my own table will pull me apart and lie in the doorway licking my blood. And his mother, standing next to him, opens her dress and holds her breast in her hand and begs him by it. Remember this, she says. Remember when this quieted you. And he does not move. He stands there in front of the gate and argues with himself, out loud, and it is the most human speech in the poem. He says, if I go in now, Polydamas is going to be the first man I see, and he told me to bring the army inside last night, and I refused, and I have destroyed this city by being too proud to listen, and I will never be able to look at anybody again. So better to stay. Either I kill him, or I die here in front of the walls, and at least I die properly. And then he thinks about a third thing, and this is why the speech is unbearable. He thinks, or I could put my shield down, lay the shield against the wall, take the helmet off, put the spear on the ground, and walk out there with my hands empty, and tell him he can have Helen back, and everything Paris brought with her, and half of everything in the city on top of it. All of it. Take it all and stop. And then he answers himself. He says, why am I even discussing this with myself? If I go out there with no armor on, he will not talk to me. He will kill me standing there like a woman, with nothing in her hands. There is no way to sit down with that man. We cannot talk this over from a rock or from under a tree, the way two people do. And while he is standing there thinking it, Achilles arrives. And Hector runs. That is what Homer wrote. The best man in Troy, the one who has held it together for 10 years, looks at what is coming and turns and runs away. And Homer does not apologize for him or explain it, and it is the reason he is real. They go along under the wall, past the lookout post, past the windswept fig tree, out along the wagon road, and they come to the two springs where the river starts. And one of those springs runs hot, with steam coming off it, and the other runs cold as hail even in the middle of summer. And beside the springs there are wide stone troughs, good ones, well made. That is where the wives and the daughters of Troy used to bring the washing and beat it clean in the days before the Greeks came. You know this ground. You have been here. Before all of this, you came out through that gate with an armful of clothes and your mother or your sister beside you. And you knelt on the stone in the sun with your sleeves pushed up and the hot water on one side and the cold on the other. And there was talking. And somebody's child was in the water at the shallow end and had to be shouted at twice. The stone is worn down in the middle where hands have gone over it for years. You could find the smooth part with your eyes closed. And now two men are running past it at full speed, and one of them is going to be dead in a few minutes. And the troughs are exactly where they always were, and nobody has washed anything in them for 9 years. 3 times round the city, at a dead run, with the whole army and both cities watching. And Homer compares it to a dream. He says it was like a dream where you are trying to catch a man and cannot get near him, and he is trying to get away from you and cannot, and neither of you gets anywhere. Then Zeus lifts up the golden scales one last time and puts the two of them in it, and Hector's side goes down, and Apollo leaves him. And Athena comes to Hector, wearing his brother's face. She tells him she has come out of the gates to stand with him, and let us fight this man together, you and me. And Hector believes it. He turns round and stops running, because he thinks his brother has come out for him. He faces Achilles, and he tries, one more time, to make it a human transaction. He says, I will not run from you again. Let us agree one thing first, in front of the gods. If I kill you, I will strip your armor and give your body back to your people. Do the same for me. And Achilles will not even discuss it. He says, do not talk to me about agreements. There are no agreements between lions and men, and there is no oath a wolf swears to a lamb, and there is nothing between you and me but one of us going down. Achilles throws and misses, and Hector sees it miss and says so, and Athena picks up the spear and puts it back in Achilles' hand without Hector seeing her do it. Then Hector throws and hits the shield square in the middle, and it comes off it, and he stands there with nothing left in his hands, and he calls for his brother to bring him a spear, and there is nobody there. And that is when he knows. He says it out loud, quietly, and it is the last clear thought he has. He says, "The gods have called me. I thought my brother was here, and he is not here. This was arranged, and it was arranged a long time ago, and I am not going to die quietly, at least, and not without doing something they will talk about." And he draws his sword and comes at him. Achilles is wearing new armor, but Hector is wearing Achilles' old armor, and Achilles knows every inch of it. He knows exactly where it does not cover. There is a gap at the throat, where the neck piece and the collarbones meet, and that is where he puts the spear, and it goes through the soft part of the neck without cutting the windpipe on purpose, so that the man can still speak. And Hector, on the ground, dying, asks for one thing. He asks for his body. He says, "Take the ransom. Take all the bronze and gold my father and mother will give you. There is any amount of it, and let them have my body home so that the Trojans and their wives can burn me properly." And Achilles says no in the worst words he ever uses. He says, "Do not talk to me about knees or parents. I wish I could bring myself to cut you up and eat you raw for what you have done to me. There is no man alive who will keep the dogs off your head. Not if they brought me 10 times the ransom, or 20. Not if Priam himself weighed out your body in gold. Your mother is never going to lay you on a bier and mourn over her own son. The dogs and the birds are going to have every part of you." And Hector, with almost nothing left, tells him the truth. He says, "I knew it. I knew what you were. There is iron in your chest, and there was never any point talking to you. But be careful. Remember me, on the day Paris and Apollo kill you at the Scaean gate." Then he dies, and the soul goes down out of him, crying for its youth. And Achilles answers him anyway. He talks to the body. He says, "Die. I will take my own death whenever it comes." Then the Greeks come running up, and every one of them who arrives puts a spear into the corpse, and Homer says it out loud, that they wounded him after he was dead, and they said among themselves that Hector was much easier to handle now. And then Achilles does the thing that all of this has been about. He cuts through the tendons behind both heels, from heel to ankle, and threads oxhide straps through, and ties them to the chariot rail so the head hangs, and he gets up into the chariot, and lifts the armor into it, and whips the horses, and drives. And the dust comes up round the head as it goes, and the hair spreads out in the dirt on both sides, and the head of the man who held that city together goes along the ground behind 2 horses, in front of his mother and his father, who are standing on the wall. His mother screams and tears her headdress off and throws it. His father groans, and the men around him have to hold him back, because he is trying to open the gate and go out and kneel in front of Achilles in the dust. And the whole city starts crying at once. And Homer says it sounded like the sound Troy would make if it were already burning. And inside the house, in a room away from all of it, Hector's wife does not know yet. She is at the loom. She is weaving a wide purple cloak with a pattern going into it, and it is for him. And she has just called the women and told them to put a big cauldron on the fire and heat the water for Hector's bath, so that it will be ready when he comes in from the fighting. Homer says, "Poor fool. She did not know that he was a long way from any bath." And then she hears the noise from the tower. She drops the shuttle. It goes across the floor. She tells 2 of the women to come with her, and she runs. and she gets up onto the wall and pushes through the men standing there and looks out, and she sees him being dragged along the ground in front of the city towards the ships. And the dark comes over her eyes, and she goes down backwards, and the headdress comes off her hair, and it is the veil that Aphrodite gave her on her wedding day, and it lies there on the stone. And when they bring her round, she starts speaking, and what she talks about is not her husband. It is her son. She says he is going to grow up an orphan. And here is what happens to an orphan. He goes round the tables of his father's friends at a feast, tugging at their coats, and one of them will hold out a cup to him for a moment and let him wet his lips and not enough to fill him. And then some boy with both parents alive will hit him and push him away from the table and tell him to get out. Your father is not eating with us. And he will come back to his mother crying. And that is the same child who used to sit on his father's knee in this house and eat nothing but marrow and the fat of sheep. And then she says, and you are lying out there in the open, and the worms will have you naked, and there are clothes in this house, good ones, made by our own women, and I am going to burn all of them, because you will never wear any of them, and it is no use to you, but I will burn them anyway so that the Trojans see it done. Downstairs the water in the cauldron comes up to a boil, because nobody has gone to take it off the fire. Then it cools. The rest of the poem is a funeral, and then another funeral, and that is all it is, and it is the best part. The first night Achilles cannot sleep. He is lying on the shore with the men around him, filthy, and he has not washed the blood off, and he has said he will not until the fire is lit. And in the night his friend comes and stands over him. It is Patroclus exactly, his voice and his eyes and the clothes he wore, and he says, "You are asleep, and you have forgotten about me. You never forgot me while I was alive. Bury me quickly, so I can get through the gates, because the other dead will not let me across the river, and I am wandering about outside." And then he asks for one more thing. He says, "And when you die, do not let them put my bones apart from yours. Put us in the same urn, the way we grew up together in your father's house." And Achilles says yes, and asks him to stay a moment, and reaches out to put his arms round him. And his arms close on nothing, and the soul goes away under the ground like a thin smoke, and Homer says it went off with a small sound like birds. And Achilles sits up in the dark and says, to nobody, "So there is something after all. There is a soul, and it looks exactly like the person, and there is nothing in it to hold." In the morning they go up onto the mountain and cut wood all day and bring it down, and they build a pyre 100 feet on each side, and they carry him up, and every man in the army cuts a lock of his hair off and lays it on the body until it is covered over in hair. And Achilles cuts off the long lock he had been growing since he was a boy that was promised to the river at home, and puts it into his friend's hands and closes the hands on it. Then they load the fire, sheep and cattle laid all round him, and the fat of them laid over the body, and jars of honey and oil put in along the sides, and 4 horses, and 2 of his 9 dogs, and the 12 young Trojan men, with their hands tied, killed with bronze on the wood. Homer does not soften it, and he does not look away from it. He says, in his own voice, that Achilles' heart was set on evil work. That is the poet's verdict on his own hero, in the middle of the funeral, and it is there in the text for anyone to find. And it is why this is not a poem about a great man. The fire will not catch. He has to pray to the winds, and they come in the night and get it going, and it burns until dawn. And Achilles stands beside it the whole night pouring wine on the ground out of a 2-handled cup and calling his friend's name. In the morning they put the embers out with wine and pick the white bones out of the ash and wrap them in fat and put them in a golden urn, and they do not bury it. They carry it into the hut and lay a cloth over it, and it stays there because it is waiting for the second lot of bones to be put in with it. Then they mark out a circle and pile the earth up for a mound. And then, because the funeral is done, Achilles holds games. And this is the part almost every retelling cuts, and I want it in, because it is the poem breathing out. There is a chariot race first, with a woman and a tripod for the first prize, and 5 men enter, and it is a mess. A goddess breaks one man's yoke, and he goes off into the ditch. A god knocks the whip out of Diomedes' hand. Old Nestor gives his son a long, detailed, and slightly obsessive lecture beforehand about how to take the turning post, and his son takes it too literally and cuts Menelaus off in a narrow place where the road has washed out, and Menelaus has to pull his horses up to avoid a crash and shouts at him. And when they come in, there is an argument about the prizes, and it goes on for a long time, and it is completely recognizable. Achilles wants to give second prize to the man whose yoke broke out of pity. Nestor's son objects on the grounds that it is his prize. Thank you. And if Achilles wants to be generous, he can go and get something else out of his own hut. And Achilles laughs. He actually laughs 4 days after the pyre and does exactly that. And Menelaus is still angry about the cornering, and the young man apologizes to him well and offers him the mare, and Menelaus is so pleased at being asked properly that he gives it back, and there is a 5th prize left over and no 5th finisher, so Achilles gives it to Nestor for nothing as a courtesy to an old man, and Nestor makes a speech about how good he used to be at all of this. Then there is boxing, and the big man wins and knocks the other man flat, and then picks him up off the ground himself and stands him on his feet, and his friends lead him away with his head hanging down and spitting blood. Then wrestling, Ajax against Odysseus, and neither of them can put the other down, and Achilles stops it and gives them equal prizes. Then a foot race, and one of the runners slips in the cattle dung left over from the sacrifices and gets a mouthful of it, and comes in second, and stands there spitting and complaining that the goddess tripped him. And the whole army laughs at him. That is 4 days after 12 boys were killed on a fire. Homer puts those things next to each other on purpose. Men grieve, and men are cruel. And then men race chariots and argue about the results and laugh at a man who fell over. All of it is true at the same time. He never once tells you how to feel about it. But it does not fix Achilles. That is the point of the games. Everything correct has now been done, all of it, the fire and the bones and the mound and the prizes, and it has not touched him at all. So for 12 days, every morning at first light, he yokes the horses and ties Hector to the chariot and drags him 3 times round the tomb of his friend, and then leaves him lying face down in the dirt and goes back to the huts and lies there and does it again the next day. He cannot sleep. Homer stays with him through the nights. He lies on his side, then on his back, then face down, then gets up and walks along the edge of the sea by himself in the dark, and he is out there every night when the light comes up over the water. And the gods, watching this, decide it has to stop. Even Apollo, who hates him, puts it in terms of decency rather than justice. The man has no shame left, he says, and there is no profit in it for him, and he is abusing dumb earth. So Zeus sends for Achilles' mother, and Achilles' mother comes and sits down beside her son and tells him the gods are angry with him and that he must take the ransom and give the body back. And Achilles says yes. He says it in 6 words, without a fight. Let it be so. Let the man come and bring the ransom and take him away. 12 days of dragging a corpse round a grave, and it ends the moment somebody he loves asks him to stop. Then a goddess goes to Troy, into a house where the family are all sitting on the floor, crying with the old man in the middle of them with dirt on his head, and tells him to load a wagon and go and buy his son back, alone, with one driver, and not to be afraid, because someone will come with him. His wife tells him he is out of his mind. She says, "You have iron in you. That man has eaten your children. He will not respect you, and he will not pity you, and he will kill you in that hut. And Priam goes anyway, and before he goes, he shouts at his surviving sons in the courtyard, which is the ugliest and most honest moment he has. He calls them useless and a disgrace, and liars and dancers and thieves of lambs, and says he wishes every one of them had died instead of Hector. Then he opens the storerooms, and this is the part where you feel how old he is, because he counts it out himself, item by item. 12 good robes, 12 blankets, 12 cloaks, 12 tunics, 10 bars of gold, 2 tripods, 4 cauldrons, and a cup that was given to him years ago on an embassy, which he loved, and which he puts in the pile with the rest. And Homer notes that he did not hold anything back at all because he wanted his son. Then he goes out through his own gates at night, and the whole city walks with him as far as the wall, crying, and following him with their hands, as if he were the one being carried out. You are in the wagon on the plain in the dark, and there is nothing around you at all. 2 animals, an old man beside you holding the reins, and behind you a load of cloth and metal that is meant to buy back a body. You go past the mound of a king who died before any of this started. You come up to the ditch and the stakes, and then the wall, and then the gate, and the gate is standing open, and there are men lying on the ground beside it, asleep with their weapons next to them. And you go past them at a walk, and the wheels are loud, and nobody wakes up. Somebody is walking at the horses' heads. You have not looked closely at who. At the hut, he takes them past the guards and opens the great door bar that 3 men usually work, and then tells the old man to go in and leaves. And Priam goes in unseen and crosses the room to where Achilles is sitting, and puts his arms round his knees and takes hold of his hands and kisses them. And Homer says which hands they are, the dreadful hands, the man-killing hands that had killed so many of his sons. Nobody in the hut moves. Achilles has no idea who this is. And the old man says, think about your own father. He is as old as I am. He is at home right now, hemmed in by neighbors, with nobody to protect him, and it hurts him every day. But he can still hope. He can hear that you are alive, and hope to see you come back. I had 50 sons when this war started. Most of them are dead. The one who was left, the one who protected the city and everybody in it, you killed a few days ago, and I have come here to buy him back, and I have brought a great deal for him. Respect the gods, Achilles. Think of your father, and pity me, who am more pitiable than he is, because I have brought myself to do the thing that no man on earth has done before. I have kissed the hands of the man who killed my children. And Achilles begins to cry, and it is not for Hector. He starts crying for his own father, because the old man in front of him has put the thought in his head. And then, still holding him, he starts crying for Patroclus instead, and he cannot stop. And Priam is on the floor at his feet, crying for Hector, and the sound of 2 men crying in a shelter on a beach, for 2 completely different people, fills the whole building. And when he has finished, Achilles gets up and takes the old man by the hand and lifts him off the floor and says, sit down. Let us leave the grief where it is, however much of it there is, because it does not achieve anything. Crying does not bring men back. And then he tells him about the 2 jars. He says, Zeus has 2 jars standing on his floor. One of them is full of good things, and the other is full of evil. And he gives out a mixture from both to some men, and to some he gives only out of the bad one. And those men go around the earth with nothing right in their lives from beginning to end. My father got everything: wealth, a kingdom, a goddess for a wife, and then he got 1 son. And that son is going to die young in a foreign country, and is not there to look after him in his old age. You got everything too. And then you got this. Bear it. Sit down and eat something. And they eat. He has to talk him into it. He says even Niobe ate, who lost 12 children in one day, and eventually she remembered to eat. They wash the body first, but the women do it round the back, out of the old man's sight, so that he will not see the state of his son and cry out, and so that Achilles will not lose his temper at being cried at, because Achilles knows exactly how thin the thread is that he is holding and says so out loud. And then Achilles lifts Hector onto the wagon himself. And afterwards, with the food gone and the wine poured, the two of them sit across from each other in the lamplight and look at one another, and Homer gives them one line each. Priam looks at Achilles and thinks how big he is and how good to look at, like one of the gods. And Achilles looks at Priam's face and listens to the sound of his voice and cannot stop looking at him. Then they make up a bed for him outside under the porch, and Achilles is honest about why. Because if one of the Greek captains came in here in the night and found you sitting in my hut, they would go straight to Agamemnon, and there would be an argument about giving the body back, and it would take days. And he asks him a practical question. How many days do you need? Tell me, and I will hold the army back. And Priam says, 9 days to mourn him, the 10th to bury him and hold the feast, and on the 11th we will build the mound. And on the 12th we will fight again, if we have to. And Achilles says, it will be as you ask. And he takes the old man's right hand at the wrist, so that he will not be afraid, and leaves him to sleep. So on that night, in that camp, the man who killed Hector and the father of Hector are asleep about 20 feet apart, and the body is on a wagon between them under a cloth, and the whole army is asleep around them, and none of the Greeks ever know it happened. Before dawn, the god wakes Priam and takes him out through the gate again with the wagon, and nobody sees them go. And they come up across the plain in the grey light with the mules going slowly, and the first person to see them is Hector's sister, up on the tower, and she calls out, and the whole city comes down to the gates in the early morning to meet a wagon. They carry him in and lay him on a bed in his own house, and the singers start the lament, and then 3 women speak, and Homer chooses which 3. His wife speaks first, and she has moved past her own grief into simple arithmetic. She says, you have died young and left me a widow, and the boy is a baby, and he will not grow up, because this city is going to be taken now, and I will be taken with it. And then she says the thing that is underneath all of it. You did not die in bed. You did not hold your hand out to me at the end. You did not say one last thing to me that I could have kept and thought about, day and night, for the rest of my life. His mother speaks second. She says he was the dearest of all her children, and that even in death the gods loved him, and that he is lying here now looking as though he had just gone to sleep. And then Helen speaks, and this is the last speech in the Iliad, and it is given to the woman the whole war was fought over, and it is not about the war at all. She says, of all my husband's brothers, you were the only one who was ever kind to me. 20 years I have been in this city. I came here, and I have never once heard a gentle word from anybody in it, except you. If one of your sisters or your mother said something cruel to me, or one of your brothers, you were the one who stopped them. You talked them out of it, because that is how you were. And now there is nobody left in Troy who is kind to me. Everybody in this city shudders when I walk past. So I am crying for you, and I am crying for myself, and there is nobody else here I can say that to. Then they spend 9 days bringing wood in from the mountain, and on the 10th day they burn him, and on the 11th they put the fire out with dark wine and pick the bones out of the ash, his brothers and his companions doing it with their hands, crying, and they wrap the bones in soft purple cloth and put them in a golden box, and set the box down in a hollow grave, and roof it over with big flat stones, and pile the earth up on top. And they post watchmen out on the plain while they do it, in case the Greeks come early. And then they go back into the city, into Priam's house, and they sit down and eat together. And that is the last line. The poem stops there. There is no epilogue, and no summary, and nobody says what any of it meant. You know what happens next, and Homer knew, and everybody sitting listening to him knew as well. The 12 days run out. The fighting starts again. Achilles is killed by an arrow at that same gate, exactly as Hector told him he would be, and he never gets inside the walls. Then a horse gets left on the beach, and the city that has held for 10 years is taken in one night. Priam is killed at an altar in his own house. Andromache is put on a ship. Nax, the baby who was frightened of the helmet, is thrown off the wall. Helen goes home to Sparta with Menelaus and lives a long time. All of that was available. It is the more exciting material, and other poets took it, and one of them made it very famous. And Homer, who could have had any of it, ends his poem 11 days earlier, on an old man and a killer eating a meal together in the dark, and then on a mound of earth with a guard posted round it, and the men who piled it going home to have supper. He does not tell you that the war is stupid. He does not tell you that Achilles was wrong, or that Hector deserved better, or that the gods are unjust. He puts a wedding, and a lawsuit, and a boy with a lyre on a shield, and then he has the man carrying that shield cut the tendons of another man's heels. He lets both stand. What he does at the end is smaller than a verdict, and it has lasted 3,000 years. He puts two men in a room who have every reason to kill each other, and he lets them look at each other's faces and cry about different people and eat. That is the whole of the Iliad. The anger of Achilles, what it cost, and what was left afterwards. Sleep well.